Have you ever woken up and wondered where you would find fuel for cooking your breakfast, lunch, or dinner? Well, that is the reality for more than 600 million people in sub-Saharan Africa who have no access to electricity. Every day, most of these people walk many miles looking for firewood as fuel. Even those with access to electricity face regular blackouts due to an infrastructure that is archaic, inadequate, and often highly susceptible to variations in climatic conditions, and must resort to the expensive diesel fuel as backup systems. The Energy Africa Conference is working to help improve the situation. My name is Luca Pawanga, professor at Regis University and founder and executive director of the Energy Africa Conference, and we invite you to join us in this effort. The purpose of the Energy Africa Conference is twofold. One is to provide a platform that brings together high-level decision makers from academia, national governments, business, and civil society from across the globe to meet with their counterparts from Africa to network, form partnerships, share best practices and technologies, and invest in the work needed to deploy power systems that are economically viable, affordable, accessible, sustainable, clean, and resilient. The undeveloped renewable energy sources promise a cost-effective, environmentally friendly, and sustainable approach for Africa to meet its energy needs. Second is to source impactful projects that we can collaboratively actualize to make a positive difference on the ground and recast the lives of many African citizens while expanding your business, thus doing well while doing good, which is a win-win situation. The conference is held every year in Colorado because Colorado is one of the leading states in the nation in developing and disseminating forward-looking, innovative, clean energy policies and practices. We hope to share this experience with you and use it as a springboard for solutions and connecting you and firms around the world to the business opportunities in the African power sector. Whether you are an investor, project developer, consulting company, engineering, construction, and management company, a business professional, or somebody interested in networking and knowing more about the African sector, join us and learn from high-level decision makers, firms, and individuals who are already operating in Africa, and learn how you can plug into the many high-return business opportunities in this sector. We hope this conference will inspire you to think bigger and more broadly about energy-related opportunities, to expand your horizons, to grow your businesses, and be part of the solution in making the world a better place. Conference information can be found at our website, energyafricaconference.com. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. This is Peter Eigen. I am very pleased and very honored that Professor Luca Povanga has allowed me to talk to him in front of this important conference about a very important project which I have been promoting during the last couple of years. Perhaps I should introduce myself. I am a former World Bank lawyer. I worked for a couple of years in the legal department of the World Bank, and then I became a manager and ended up as a director for our regional office in East Africa in Nairobi. Altogether, I spent about 25 years in the World Bank, and in particular in the energy sector. I had a lot of projects in Africa, but also in Latin America, where I also spent a couple of years. In 1989, 1990, I became very much aware that in Africa, a lot of the good efforts of the governments, of the people, of the institutions to strengthen democracy and to strengthen the economic development in their countries were undermined by systematic corruption. Systematic corruption, which I noticed very often was driven by large companies in Europe and in the world, and with the exception of the United States, foreign bribery was allowed in most exporting countries. And therefore, this had become more or less the norm and was rather officially accepted by the host countries and in particular by the home countries of these companies, which in many cases, like in Germany, in the UK, and France, they were even allowed to deduct bribe payments in Africa or in other countries outside their own as tax deductible income. So in many ways, this was a terrible situation, and I began to complain in the World Bank in various meetings, but also I organized a couple of colleagues of mine who start together a task force which would develop a very strong systemic approach to stop bribery in not only in Africa, but also in many other parts of the world. But I was very surprised when I found out that the World Bank did not allow me to do this. I now know why. The reason is that, in fact, the member countries of the World Bank, with the exception of the United States, which had the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, they allowed their companies and even encouraged and officially helped their companies to bribe other decision makers, presidents, ministers, heads of state companies. And therefore, they didn't want the World Bank to look over their shoulders. And they thought they simply have to accept this as a flaw of the global market economy, and that everybody was doing it, and therefore they would have to allow their own citizens, their own companies, to go out and bribe other decision makers. I would not accept that at the time, and therefore I left the World Bank. And in 1990, I began to develop the idea of having a non-governmental organization which would be fighting corruption systematically. And in 1993, I finally was ready. And in Berlin, we founded Transparency International. And the great story was that with our approach, we very quickly managed to change the legal system, change the culture. In 1997, the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development, they passed a law or passed a convention where member countries, signatory countries, committed themselves to stop their nationals and to criminalize foreign bribery. So this is my probably most significant feature as a person when I'm talking to you today. Because since this time, for about 15 years, we worked very hard and we really changed the system. Now the World Bank, for instance, has become a very powerful ally in fighting corruption, and so have the other international development banks, so have the countries, the UK, France, Germany, and so on. They all, the Scandinavian countries, they all are now very much interested in fighting corruption. So this is my main background. And when I left Transparency International, which by now has about 110 chapters everywhere in the world, including one in Zambia, Dr. Puvanga. When I left there, I started together with a group of other NGOs, the Extractive Industry Transparency Initiative. This was aiming at trying to make sure that the governance for oil and gas and mining and so on was such that the host countries, in particular, again, in Africa, would get a fair deal out of this. And this is still working. And in fact, our main tool at the time was a multi-stakeholder approach where governments, civil society, and private sector together meet regularly and discuss what can be changed in the enabling environment for mining and extractive industries in order to have a fair, stable deal. This experience with the Extractive Industry Transparency Initiative, which is still running very well. I mean, there are 54 countries right now participating, and hundreds of companies and several hundreds of civil society organizations, all with equal voting rights as groups. This experience gave me the idea that one can use this multi-stakeholder approach also in other areas. So I'm very pleased to say that we started this in the fisheries sector. We have now developed FITI, the Fisheries Transparency Initiative, which has its secretariat in the Seychelles and has a couple of African coastal countries, several Latin American countries, Indonesia, participating to strengthen local governance in the fisheries sector, where again, these three actors, civil society, private sector, and government representatives meet regularly to see where are the obstacles to investments, where are the obstacles to good development and to protecting at the same time nature and protecting the climate. And this experience has led to an invitation by Kofi Annan, the late Secretary General of the United Nations, to a Africa Progress Panel. And that Progress Panel wrote in 1997 this report, which is basically pointing out with some urgency that about 600,000 people die every year in Africa prematurely because they are cooking with charcoal and so on in their huts, and they are not connected with the electric power grid. So we decided at the time that we should start a local electricity access program in Africa. And of course, we found out there very quickly that there are tremendous efforts worldwide to exactly extend electricity into the rural areas, to extend it beyond the grids. And therefore, there was a surprise that why we have these technical innovations, the technical strengths and possibilities, which are so well presented by Professor Povanga in his conferences. And we have a lot of financial systems which are quite functioning. Why do we still have this tremendous lacunae of electric access in rural Africa? This is why we created LEAP, which is the abbreviation of Local Electricity Access Program, where we do not want to duplicate what so many others are already doing, that is trying to get the off-grid electricity into the houses and so on of people dispersed all over Africa or Latin America and Asia. We focus on how we can strengthen the enabling environment for investment in off-grid electricity. Where are the obstacles? Where are the problems? Where are the obstacles? Where are the problems? And we feel, and this is what Kofi Annan and the Africa Progress panel at the time determined, that one of the main obstacles is that there is no proper governance in the local context. There's very good energy governance in many countries, and I can testify to that. While I was in the World Bank, I promoted a lot of large hundreds of millions of dollars of electricity lending, whether it was in power dams like in Zambia or whether it was in pipelines, whether it was in transmission lines. Very often World Bank development financing, and also from the African Development Bank and other development institutions, their support is combined with very strong and very good advice about electricity and energy policies at the national level. But what we found out was that not only were the off-grid markets rather neglected by this, because most of the national power centers and the electricity organizations and public utilities, they are very much interested to get access to these large projects which were available in the international market. They were even hostile to some of the initiatives which would bring electricity off-grid to the rural areas in Africa. Partly because they lost their market, which they hope to cover in the future when the grids could be extended. Partly their vested interests in selling generators and selling oil and so on. But partly it was also an absence of a sound governance system within these local situations. Very often there were strongmen who would very quickly take up most of the production if some off-grid electricity was established. Very often people didn't want to pay for electricity. Very often the investors didn't get any assurances what would happen if the grid, for instance, the national grid extended to this locality, and they would, of course, be outpriced by the electricity coming from the national grids, and so on. So there are quite a number of obstacles which have more to do with what the local population and the local governance representatives, but also the private sector providers, investors, and importers wanted to see. And to bring this together, we want to apply this multi-stakeholder approach, which was so successful in the Extractive Industry Transparency Initiative. In other words, we would like to create a system whereby the users, the providers, the private sector, they all respectfully meet regularly, not only once or twice a year or so, but in regular meetings in order to observe what are the obstacles, the governance obstacles for this kind of investment, this kind of decentralized power supply. Now, this is something which we try to introduce in various countries. And in Senegal, we got a very, very open reception. I mean, the Minister of Energy and Oil, Petroleum Energy, she wrote us a very inviting letter and nominated some top officials to be our counterparts. We found in Senegal excellent contacts in the private sector. We are connected with various advisors in the government. So, and we have even already begun to establish, not we, but some of our friends in Dakar have already begun to establish a multi-stakeholder national working group, which is willing to meet very soon in the next couple of weeks in Senegal in order to see whether this is something which would help in Senegal to facilitate faster development of off-grid electricity. Now, we also have developed a system where we would bring this kind of multi-stakeholder dialogue into the villages themselves, not only at the national level. The national level is extremely important because very often, as I mentioned earlier, the national energy policies are not particularly favorable to encouraging local development. In Senegal, there is a very strong interest in this, both in the government, but also in the donor community. And of course, we have spoken to my former colleagues of the World Bank, we have spoken to the African Development Bank, we have spoken to quite a number of local associations and bilateral donors. But we are at the stage where we want to take off with this first meeting of a national multi-stakeholder group. And then in the future, if there are more than 2, 3, perhaps 10 villages who would want to participate, we will make an effort to help to set up these multi-stakeholder groups in these various localities. In order to develop this further, we have brought together a rather interesting sort of international group. I mean, I myself, I've been working on this now for 4 years. In regular meetings, we have during the COVID period, of course, at virtual meetings, but it was sort of headquartered and organized in an organization which is called Humboldt-Viadrina Governance Platform, which is a platform for civil society development for better governance. And we hope that we will be able to have a small secretariat there, which will support a global advisory group, an advisory group which will then also bring in people like the people who are at this conference, you know, who can help us to give us the real life content. I mean, I'm not an expert in electricity and energy. I'm more an expert in mobilizing civil society to overcome governance weaknesses like corruption, for instance. And I'm still very much involved with Transparency International in pursuing this from the sidelines as the grandfather of Transparency International. But I'm very keen to make this work, and I would be very grateful if some of you in the audience, and in particular you, Professor Bovanga, would take this on as an important issue, not as something which would be trying to replace the role of representative government. Of course, in democracies, it's the elected people, the parliaments, the parties, the ministers, president, and so on, the judiciary. They are the ones who take the decisions. But they are, in my opinion, extremely interested to get a very well-considered advice from multi-stakeholder groups which reflect the real needs of the people on the ground. So this is what I wanted to discuss with you, Professor Bovanga, and I hope I have not spoken too long.
Hello, I'm Sherry Plants-Masters, and I'm the Dean of the Anderson College of Business and Computing, where we integrate business and computing education to build a better world. Regis University formed the Anderson College of Business and Computing in May of this year. The Anderson College pursues innovation through our capabilities, through the expertise of our faculty across the disciplines of business and computing, through collaboration across and between those disciplines, and through our intentional focus on inclusion. Regis University is an innovator in higher education. In the 1970s, Regis University pioneered an accelerated learning model designed to meet the needs of the adult learner who juggled work and family priorities while pursuing a degree. In the 1990s, Regis University embraced online delivery of education, offering degrees across many disciplines, including MBA, which quickly grew to one of the largest in the nation and produced thousands of graduates. In 2010, Regis University was the first institution to offer fully online ABET accredited degrees in computer science and computer information systems. Regis University was the first in the region and one of the first in the nation to offer a master's degree in data science, which is the largest in the region. And now Regis University is the first to integrate business and computing education into a single college to meet the changing dynamic needs of the business world. Students across the college, from accounting and management to computer science and software engineering, benefit from college-wide outcomes. Graduates learn to approach problems from a systems perspective, assessing and evaluating solutions to assure that they meet the needs of a system. They learn to use data and analytics for informed decision-making. We prepare students and graduates for careers through experiences that help them develop their skills, capabilities, behaviors, and attitudes, as well as a commitment to community. And graduates develop an awareness of and a commitment to the common good and to building a sustainable future through the foundation of a Jesuit education. Thank you.
Welcome. My name is Luca Puanga, Professor of Economics and Finance in the Anderson College of Business and Computing at Regis University. That was a very nice presentation by Peter, and now I do have Max from the International Energy Agency in in Paris, to join me. Hi, Max.
Hello, Professor Puanga.
Max, that was a very impressive presentation by Peter. But I would like to know, what is it that the local electrification access program is offering that is not already being offered by the numerous organizations that already exist?
Well, as Peter very clearly said, it's complementary, and the emphasis is on governance and transparency in this sector. In the same way as the other initiatives that Peter set up and ably have led the development of, for example, in the extractives around corruption in fisheries and so forth, it's going to be very, very important to ensure that we really keep an attention on governance at the local level regarding how we scale up, the scale up we need to see in terms of local electricity access and so forth. So in that sense, it's different because the focus is on transparency and governance and getting that right. And having the people have their say, having a multi-stakeholder approach to this is key. And I'm pleased to be as a part of this in my role. Not in my role, I'm serving as a personal capacity, but I've got the clearance from my organization to serve on the International Advisory Board of this new initiative. And it's something I want to continue doing as long as possible. I believe in the mission. I was involved since the very beginning with Peter. At the time, I was one of the authors of the Power People Planet report when I was a director with Kofi Annan in Geneva at the Africa Progress Panel. And it's something which I feel passionately we need to get this right. We need to make sure that our people at the local level have a say in the governance of how this sector rolls out in terms of getting the access for electricity, getting us to a situation in Africa where we have, modern energy for everyone. We end energy poverty, and we make sure that people have the say in how that's done and how the money is spent at the local level.
The role and power of civil society organizations is well known. Now, with your approach, you are looking at a multi-stakeholder approach and working with the government. Now, working with the government, isn't that relinquishing the power of the civil society organizations to the government? Because now they will be working under the thumb of the government.
Well, I don't know if Peter's on the line. I see he's in the room. He is the expert on this. But if we can understand correctly, civil society is not an antagonist to government. Civil society has a role to play, but it has a particular role to play. So in that sense, we're not saying that this is against governance or against the local actors who are leading, as they've been elected to lead policy implementation. But civil society has a voice, and it's a voice to check and to make sure that the other voices, the other stakeholders are taken on board as policies implemented. But Peter, as I say, is the expert. I see he's joined us now. I cede the floor to my senior colleague, Peter Eigen, to answer this far better than I've done.
Yes, Peter. Can you add something to that?
Yes, of course. I mean, I'm very happy that Max took care while I was struggling with my computer here. Max knows very well what the origin was of our effort to bring electricity to rural or decentralized users in Africa, but also hopefully in other continents, because we noticed in other contexts with the Extractive Industry Transparency Initiative, with the Fisheries Transparency Initiative, that indeed governments and the private sector and civil society organizations, they all have different aspirations, they have different perspectives, they have different interests. What we noticed was that if you can bring them together in a respectful and open dialogue, or you should call it trialogue, because there are three parties, then eventually they will understand each other, they will understand the positions of the other side, and they will, out of this, hopefully develop a credible system of improving governance, not only at the national level in each country, like in Senegal, for instance, but also in individual local situations, in the villages, in the thousands of villages, for instance, in Senegal, but in the millions of villages in Africa, bringing a consensus which allows people to strengthen governance and create a stable environment for investment, which would then allow the private sector to come in and put their money at risk and their technologies and their wisdom and their international connections, which would then finally spread electricity into the rural areas of these countries.
Well, this question, either Peter or Max can answer it. International finance institutions such as the World Bank or the Development Finance Corporation, they combine their financing with the specific requirements, and they also offer a lot of advice in terms of governance, policies, and so on. So why is your organization needed for this? Isn't this enough for countries to really actualize the idea of energy access?
Well, I mean, I have been involved in 25 years of World Bank work at the end as a director for the regional office in East Africa. I've been involved in many, many cases where the World Bank and other donors provided a lot of funding and a lot of also expertise to the countries in order to strengthen their overall electricity system. But very often they combine this with very strong advice, if not conditionality in many countries, which very often African governments are rather reluctant to accept, but very strong advice on how a sector policy should be shaped in a way that this electricity will also be properly and stably and fairly used in the country. Now, this is very much focused on national policies. What we have experienced is that very often the national authorities, which are in charge of electricity and power and other issues, by the way, are rather skeptical about what is happening outside their grids. They are rather skeptical, if not even hostile, to possibilities of providing direct relations and investments in areas which they hope to cover in the future. So in Nigeria, in Kenya, in Senegal, everywhere you see the national governments guaranteeing the expansion of electricity to the local people, but it's not happening. Why not? Because very often in the local context, the the governance, the rules of the game, the decision making, and so on at the local level are not fair and are not clear and are not stable. There may be a couple of strongmen in the village who want to start a car repair shop, so they need different electricity. There may be people who want to run a clinic for the people. They need refrigerators in order to protect the medicines from spoiling and so on. There may be schools in there which believe that they want to teach the children also when the sun has gone down, and when their school children have to do their homework at home. There may be sawmills in some villages, and very often the strong man then insists that most of the electricity is devoted to them, and very often the common user are not really aware of the fact that this is their electricity, but that they have to provide for cost recovery. They have to pay the fees. They have to make sure that there are spare parts when the thing falls apart. They have to be quite clear that the amounts and the way the electricity is allocated in a mini grid is fair and stable. Now that is very often missing, and therefore, say an investor from Germany or an investor from Dakar, he may be very reluctant to put his money into villages which are without this agreement, without this consensus on how the rules of the game should be developed. And this is why Kofi Annan and the Africa Progress Panel, like Maximilian Jarrett said earlier, they found that we have to do something in order to invite investment, to invite the development of off-grid electricity all over the world, but in particular in Africa. And this is why, for instance, in Senegal, we find a lot of receptivity. The Minister of Petroleum and Energy has invited us to come. She has nominated people to work with us. So we have at the national level already a multi-stakeholder group which would be very much aware of the national policies which have been dealt with since many, many years in the country with the help of donors, but also with a very enlightened government. They are very much aware that if you want to expand into the villages, you need an effort to mobilize the different interests and so on of civil society, government, and private sector in order to build a stable governance environment for investment in the villages. So this is why we think we are adding that particular element, which is very special. And I can imagine that in many African countries, people will very much welcome this, because everybody sees they cannot simply continue a system where millions and millions of people, hundreds of millions of people, are excluded from this basic commodity, which is electricity access.
Well, Peter and Max, thank you very much for the clarification.
No, I'm very pleased that you give me this opportunity, Professor Poranga. And I hope not only will we have this conference, but hopefully also find ways in which you can help us with your great network to understand better what is needed and to help to build a concept which then can be applied in each country with the help of the local people, of the local civil society, of local business people, of local government authorities to together create an enabling environment for finally strengthen the provision of electricity in this dispersed space.
Thank you again, and we're looking forward to working with you, Peter. Your objective or mission matches very, very well with ours. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And I'm looking forward to work with you, not only in Denver, but also in Zambia.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The sun. Every day, the sun shines more than 3 trillion watts of free energy on the Earth. That's enough energy to power over 3 million homes for an entire year, being produced every day. Solar panels harness the energy and convert it into clean electricity to power our homes, businesses, and lifestyles. Light from the sun stimulates electrons on a solar panel. These electrons create DC, or direct current electricity. Solar electricity travels from the panels on your roof through an inverter to the circuit breaker panel of your building. An inverter changes DC electricity into usable AC, or alternating current electricity, before sending it to the breaker panel of your building. Your home uses that electricity to power the electronic devices we use every day. It's like having your own power plant on your roof with an endless supply of clean energy. Anytime the panels are producing more energy than you are using, like sunny days when you are on vacation, the excess energy is sent back to your utility company, where they are required to buy back your excess electricity at the same rates they would normally charge, a concept called net metering. The utility company purchases your excess solar electricity and sells that energy to homes and businesses in your neighborhood. Even homes and businesses that do not have solar panels are still buying your excess solar electricity. When the sun goes down, your home or business purchases electricity from your local utility company the same way it has in the past. However, credits from your excess solar energy produced during the day will offset nighttime charges, which are much cheaper than peak daytime rates. This maximizes your savings through time of use billing, where you are selling energy to the utility during daytime peak hours while buying energy during nighttime off-peak hours. Instead of buying electricity from a power plant that burns coal and other pollutants, you are taking advantage of the free, abundant energy of the sun. As energy rates continue to go up, your system produces clean, renewable energy at no cost to you. Now you get to choose how much to spend on electricity. Imagine if we could do that with gasoline prices. Today, there are some incredible incentives and rebate to help pay for solar installation. Finance programs can help you install panels for as little as $500 down. Increase the value of your home or business by reducing your energy costs. Businesses will increase profits, while homeowners will increase their home's market value. Help save the environment and reduce global warming. Start producing your own clean energy. For more information, visit Solar Buddy's system quote page to see how solar will benefit your home or business today.
Welcome to the Energy Africa Conference. Today we are privileged to have Dr. Vivek Lara, who is the Chief Executive of General Atomics Global Corporation. Welcome, Dr. Lara.
Thank you so much. Pleasure to be here.
Dr. Lara, just give me a brief history about your company. What does General Atomics Global Corporation do?
Yeah, thank you. So we are based here in San Diego, California. We are a technology company in various spheres. We have one of our affiliates, General Atomics Aeronautical Systems, that looks at unmanned platforms. Then we have General Atomics Electromagnetic Systems, where we're looking at aircraft launch and recovery systems, space nuclear, and so forth, as well as a host of commercial products that are applicable in oil and gas and so forth. And then another area is our energy division that looks both at nuclear fusion and fission problems and solutions. And we have several key projects with the US government. For example, we run the D3D facility here in San Diego for the Department of Energy, which is the National Fusion Center, and so forth. So we're a diversified technology company, both in the defense and energy space.
Excellent. Now, how could nuclear energy help meet the high demand for electricity without hurting the environment?
Yes, so nuclear is a zero-emission clean energy source. It generates power through fission, which is the process of splitting, as you know, uranium atoms to produce energy. The heat released by fission is used to create steam that spins a turbine to generate electricity without the harmful byproducts emitted by fossil fuels. So according to Department of Energy, Nuclear Energy Institute, and so forth, the US avoided more than 776 million metric tons of carbon dioxide emissions in 2019, as an example. That's the equivalent of removing 100 million cars from the road and more than all other clean energy sources combined. It also keeps the air clean by removing thousands of tons of harmful air pollutants each year that contribute to acid rain, smog, lung cancer, and cardiovascular disease. So the other advantage is nuclear fuel is extremely dense. It's about 1 million times greater than that of other traditional energy sources. And because of this, the amount of used nuclear fuel is not as big as people may think. All of the used nuclear fuel produced by the US nuclear energy industry, for example, over the last 60 years could fit in a football field at a depth of less than 10 yards. So that gives you some perspective on that. That waste can also be reprocessed and recycled. However, there are new advanced reactor designs that are actively being worked and developed that could operate on used fuel.
Very good. Now, what do you see as the biggest hurdles in bringing nuclear energy to modern day Africa, for instance?
So the biggest hurdles that I see in bringing nuclear energy to Africa are in 4 areas. One is the cost of infrastructure. The second will be the availability of indigenous trained workforce in this field. The third would be the regulatory infrastructure that is required. And the fourth is the radioactive waste disposition. Now, all these 4 areas, I believe Africa is now, progressed to the point where these issues can be dealt with at a localized level and overcome. So in some areas, there'll obviously be some global learnings that can help to tackle all these challenges by way of international collaborations, by way of standing up universities and programs that produce graduates that are skilled in nuclear engineering, and certainly policy making and negotiating of economic packages that make sense to Africa with the reactor vendors supplying their technologies to Africa will be also a key element. So although these are hurdles, but I think Africa is quite ready to take these on.
Well, from what you are describing, it seems to me like this is a costly undertaking, and given the idea that particularly in Africa, the infrastructure is non-existent, like you correctly pointed out. So the question would be, how can we actually make nuclear power affordable to these countries or communities?
Yes, that's an excellent question. And I think the answer lies, Doctor, in terms of the innovation that is needed. Innovation will lead to improving economics, and that has been proved around the world. And again, there are some advanced nuclear technologies, for example, that General Atomics is working on, that indeed brings down the cost of such an operation and making nuclear power more affordable. And so I think in that respect, there are, like I mentioned, the power of universities as well as academic institutions to partner with the country and global institutions to look at innovative solutions and bring the economics more affordable for Africa.
Wonderful. Now, how do you compare, let's say, nuclear power with the solar and wind energy, or generally renewable energy resources?
Yes, as I mentioned, there are various reasons that people shy away from nuclear energy, and some of those reasons I talked about. But again, the overriding factor is the fact that it is the cleanest form of energy, as well as to keep the density at the levels that nuclear energy can provide. No other form of energy can do it. There's often, in the general public view, there's often statements that are made about it's a dangerous process, it's an unstable process, and based on some accidents in the past. However, advanced technologies and advanced accident-tolerant technologies have progressed where that is not an issue. And if you look at the overall, so to speak, return on investment for countries, nuclear energy is still the cleanest and the most productive, if you will, for energy generation and electricity generation.
Excellent. Now, if you look at nuclear energy, are there other non-traditional applications that these countries who may be in a position to acquire such energy sources be able to use, rather than just power generation?
Yes, there are. There are obviously, other than producing electricity, the process heat produced in the nuclear core can also be used directly for applications such as hydrogen production. And as you know, these days, governments around the world seem to be converging on hydrogen as an area where they're investing a lot in. High temperature of the advanced reactors lead to cogeneration benefits, and emissions from the process heat certainly lead to a lot of other benefits.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Dr. Vivek Lar. It has been a pleasure talking to you. Certainly, I think that puts some light on some of the misconceptions about nuclear energy. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Welcome to the Energy Africa Conference. My name is Luca Pwanga, the Executive Director of the Energy Africa Conference. And today I have Michael Farina from Baker Hughes. Welcome, Michael.
Hey, Luca. Thank you so much for having me, and good morning to you.
Thank you. Michael, tell me a little bit about Baker Hughes.
Sure. Baker Hughes is a company that's been around for a very long time, over 100 years in the oil and gas space. But over the last decade ago or so, it's evolved quite a bit. It was merged with the General Electric company in about 5 or 7 years ago, and then also spun off in 2019. So Baker Hughes is an amalgamation of both its historic oil field services business and a set of industrial energy technology businesses, where the company is really positioning itself for the future, the low carbon future, with a variety of energy solutions for carbon capture, for hydrogen, for geothermal, a whole portfolio of asset optimization technologies, digital and monitoring and sensing equipments, and then a number of things that we can do on the electrification side in terms of technologies for integrated power solutions, compression, hybrid energy. So a real interesting spectrum. Baker Hughes obviously has one foot in its historic business with all our core customers around the continued need for oil and gas over the next couple of decades, and one foot into this industrial energy business. So that's a quick overview on Baker Hughes.
So what is Baker Hughes' interest in Africa?
Yeah, so Baker Hughes has been involved in Africa for both through the LNG business and the upstream and gas processing businesses over the last for quite a while. And we have some interests in where we've done a lot of work in places like Nigeria, Angola, Mozambique, Egypt, different places, pretty much any place where there's LNG, but also a lot of work around gas processing, and as well as in some of the distributed power solutions types of technologies for industrial turbines, compression, that sort of thing, downstream operations, refineries, petrochemical plants. And, so the interest in Africa, in context of energy transition, and one of the areas where we see some exciting growth opportunities is also within geothermal, where we have some complementary offerings across what we bring in terms of drilling and subsurface reservoir characterization and surface equipment, things like the steam turbine technologies, what they call organic ranking cycle technology, which is a waste heat recovery system, closed loop for smaller types of geothermal systems, and really kind of a world-class expertise in compression and reinjection types of technologies. Anytime you're dealing with high pressure, high temperature fluids, and and that's exactly what you get with geothermal is really trying to tap into the subsurface heat or steam, and then managing those flows, taking to the surface and converting it into useful energy. So, in terms of Africa, we've got a strong footprint there already with our existing businesses. We have a really nice portfolio of technologies. And so, one of the interests, in the future is really, how can we support the strong interest that we're getting from our customers in geothermal from Africa and then from other regions.
So what are some of the development challenges and options to help reduce risks have you encountered?
Yeah, so I mean, typically within the setting for geothermal, you have all the risks that you face within power project development. And within my 20-year energy career, I spent a lot of time on consulting on power projects, and I spent almost quite a while within the GE Power organization doing project development, 4 or 5 years within sub-Saharan Africa and Latin America. And what you really find is there's common themes around the structure of the power purchase agreements, the financing mechanisms, how you're working with the other stakeholders. Is it private, public partnership? Those types of all those structures are important. And even within that context, it's about good partners and a good technology mix. And if you then take that into the perspective around the development challenges for geothermal, I think there's some things that having the right partners can really help you reduce the risks. And geothermal brings a lot of its own unique situations, right? And probably first and foremost is, particularly in developing regions, is a familiarity issue with geothermal, right? People are more used to large scale hydroelectric or thermal technologies, and you really have to get the stakeholders up to kind of an awareness and a comfort level as to what can be done. And it's very interesting. The application of technology can actually significantly enhance the economics of a geothermal project relative to a lot of what you're seeing out there in the market, either by things like the subsurface side of it, where well construction and drilling issues can comprise maybe 40-50% of the cost. If you can do it faster and target it better and get better energy densities from each well, those dramatically reduce the costs. And so people aren't quite aware of how how geothermal is, one, how it works, two, what it needs to happen for it to be competitive. So it's a familiarity issue. The other obvious issue with geothermal is really the long cycle development. It is going to take multiple years of identifying resources and getting that the front end risks taken to validate the wells and the performance, and and then to develop it out and get paid over a long cycle. So it's a long cycle. In a lot of places, geothermal hasn't been given the full consideration, and so it's in places where you have a strong policy or regulatory framework for geothermal that you're going to do better. And then lastly, there's a variety of kind of unique infrastructure issues working in Africa, as you know, and so sometimes you can have mismatches in between where resources and say power transmission capabilities are, and that sort of thing. So so geothermal carries a lot of the traditional development risks, but these 3 or 4 things are unique to it, right? The familiarity, the long cycle of development, the need for policy, and then unique regional issues. So those are the development challenges. But really, we think that and I alluded to this before, the solution is around good partnering and good technology. And what we've seen is that with good upfront risk assessments and a reasonable policy focus and halfway well-designed power contract terms and agreements, you see some potential success for geothermal, like you see in Kenya, Ethiopia, a few other places.
You mentioned partners. How can small businesses tap into what you are doing?
So our model, and we've done this successfully in other parts of Africa, is to work with local players, sometimes giving them access to proprietary technology that they can then use within certain frameworks. So there can be partnering frameworks to able to can access and license various aspects of the technology within any kind of developments in Africa. There is a huge local component in terms of stakeholder management and getting people up to comfortable with these types of developments. Geothermal has these it's basically tapping into hot rock, and you do have issues with EHS, health and safety issues that all need to be mitigated. And so having good partners that know how to move through the process, and then good local support is we think is critical. Small businesses, probably, what we're seeing at least is that you'll see smaller companies take up the front end of the development and then bring in the right sets of financiers, debt investors, other things, technology partners. And so there's certainly a role for, the establishment of smaller companies to help kickstart geothermal, off in conjunction with their relations to the public ministries or the governments in the region. So that it takes a good group to get something moving.
Do you foresee Baker Hughes expanding its operations in East Africa?
So East Africa is a really interesting market. More broadly, we will continue to do what we've been doing in the past there. There's still appetite for, to take advantage of the abundance of gas in the region and that sort of thing. But within the context of geothermal, if you look at the geothermal market and, over the next 5 to 6 years, we expect, what's happened is probably 85% of the geothermal development has happened in about 4 or 5 regions. Europe, North America, parts of Southeast Asia, and then East Africa, where, probably, today there's about 1 gigawatt of geothermal. We expect another gigawatt to be developed over the next 4 or 5 years, with potentials much higher, especially if you can expand into surrounding regions around Kenya, where they've been very successful. In fact, Kenya produces more energy from their geothermal today than their hydroelectric generation, which points to the ability of geothermal to act as a baseload source, an important part of the East African energy mix potentially. So what we see is that we can take some of our supply chains or multimodal workshops and other different things that we have in the region, and then use those to deliver integrated solutions across the subsurface and surface solution space. And so there's as that market really starts to evolve and the strength of the energy transition accelerates, we believe that there'll be increasing interest and increasing need for technology partners like Baker Hughes in the region. So we're actually pretty excited, as East Africa is a focal point for geothermal today, and has huge expansion potential in places like Uganda, Tanzania, and it could be an important part of the mix in the region.
Thank you very much for taking your time to speak with us.
It was my pleasure. And thank you, Luca.
Regis University has been the catalyst to all of my success. I appreciate the education that I have, the distance learning, the online process, and that was another fundamental part why I continued from my bachelor's to my master's. It has changed my life to the core.
Hello, I'm Irene Kiener. I'm currently Senior Advisor with the Global Women's Network for the Energy Transition, and I'm very happy to contribute to this year's edition of Energy Africa. I would like to thank the organizers for inviting me, and I would like to pay particular tribute to Professor Luca Bovango, who has been animating this conference for so many years and so successfully and with such grand devotion. I would like to talk to you today about a development that we have in the international scene, and that is the Gender and Energy Compact. The Gender and Energy Compact is something that came out of the high-level dialogue on energy that the United Nations animated this year. But before I go into detail, let me see whether I can make this work here. Yes. Let me introduce very briefly the Global Women's Network for the Energy Transition, which is the organization I'm representing. It is an NGO that was co-founded by myself and 3 other women in 2017, and it has as its mission to support women that are active in sustainable energy, and also to work towards making the sustainable energy sector more inclusive. As we know, the sustainable energy sector is as male-dominated as is the conventional energy sector. We believe that the energy transition that is needed to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals and also to achieve the Paris climate change goal of keeping global warming below 1.5 degrees Celsius needs to draw on the largest possible talent pool, and that talent pool needs to include women and men alike. So we are working on supporting women in sustainable energy. We do that by facilitating mentoring programs and networking. We have created a dedicated platform, which is called Women Experts in Energy Platform, where more than 2,000 women have self-registered so far. It is a platform that gives the women visibility, that helps them with networking, and that also obviates the question that we have heard so many times: oh, we would have liked to hire a woman for this job, or we would have liked to have a woman on this panel. There simply are not enough good women around. We can now prove that, yes, there are enough good women. So the topic today is, as I said, the Energy Compact. And the Energy Compact is an attempt to catalyze action towards gender equality and empowering women to accelerate a just, inclusive, and sustainable energy transition. It is a way of combining, if you wish, the goals that we have defined in SDG 5, which is about gender equality, and of SDG 7, which is about affordable and clean energy. It was launched in September, on the 22nd of September, in the margins of the high-level dialogue that the General Assembly held in September on the issue of sustainable energy. And here on these slides, you can find a lot of information about that global compact. I make the slides available to Professor Povanga, so there are ways for you very easily to access that information. The compact on gender and energy has been initiated by UNIDO, the Global Women's Network for the Energy Transition, and Energia, and it counts by now with the support of a lot of stakeholders, governments, global leaders in sustainable energy, and stakeholders really from all parts of the spectrum of sustainable energy. Now, how did the development of the Gender and Energy Compact occur? What is an energy compact? An energy compact is a set of voluntary commitments that stakeholders enter into in order to accelerate the energy transition. And I will explain a little later how these energy compacts fit into the United Nations High-Level Dialogue on Energy. They are basically one area in which action is catalyzed to move from consultations and exchange of views to real action on the ground. For the compact on gender and energy in particular, it was really started at UNIDO in Vienna. UNIDO held the Vienna Energy Forum in July of 2021. But already several months before that, because we all knew that because of the COVID-19 pandemic, it might be unlikely that the Vienna Energy Forum could be held in person. UNIDO thought of a way of preparing for the WEF virtual session through a series of online consultations that started as early as fall 2020. And in the course of these virtual sessions, it became very obvious that one major stakeholder group, two major stakeholder groups really needed more attention. And those stakeholder groups were identified as women and youth. So in the context of the virtual sessions leading up to the Vienna Energy Forum, a call to action was formulated to empower women and youth to accelerate the clean energy transition. That call to action then was presented at the Vienna Energy Forum in the more or less in parallel outcomes of the high-level dialogue process of the United Nations. The high-level dialogue on energy were presented. And in the course of these consultations, the concept of energy compacts were conceptualized. And then it was only logical that the call to action to empower women and youth to accelerate the clean energy transition, which UNIDO had already formulated with stakeholders in the spring of 2021, would be turned into a series of self-commitments that would fit the format that came out of the high-level dialogue on sustainable energy and was called Energy Compact. So the idea was born to have a compact on energy and gender. Let me backtrack a little bit and give you a briefing on the UN high-level dialogue on sustainable energy. This was a global process led by the United Nations Secretariat and within the Secretariat by DESA, the Department for Economic and Social Affairs. DESA asked experts from around the globe to come together in 5 technical working groups, which elaborated reports on various aspects on the energy transition, on how to reach SDG 7 goals. I was privileged to be part of one of these technical working groups. Then, once the working groups had prepared the ground, so to speak, ministerial thematic dialogues were held in June in 2021. And during those ministerial thematic dialogues, individual countries acted as global champions for particular aspects of the topic. And then the whole process, which really ran almost for a whole year, culminated in September, as I said, 2021, at the United Nations General Assembly. It was the first time really that the United Nations had paid such high-level, focused and lengthy attention to the issue of sustainable energy. The 5 technical working groups were on energy access, how to work towards SDG 7 and net zero emissions. There was another working group on energy transition. What does it mean? What does it entail? There was a working group on enabling the SDGs through inclusive, just energy transitions. In other words, what role does energy play in our attempt to reach all the SDGs? And finally, there were two working groups on innovation, technology, and data on the one hand, and on finance and investment on the other hand. Now, let me introduce you to the essence of the Gender and Energy Compact. All these compacts, all these sets of self-commitments have some principles that all the stakeholders that subscribe to a particular compact endorse. And then in addition, there is an annex to the compacts where different stakeholders, individual stakeholders, can formulate additional commitments that they wish to enter into in order to promote attainment of SDG 7 and in order to accelerate the energy transition. So the principles that all the partners that so far have endorsed the Gender and Energy Compact agreed to are the following. First, recognize the importance of SDG 5 to achieve SDG 7. In other words, it is important that we implement equality between women and men in all its aspects in order to achieve SDG 7, which is sustainable energy for all. The second principle is that gender equality and women's empowerment should be enhanced in order to facilitate the transformation of social norms and gendered power relations. The third principle is to foster enabling policies and an inclusive and safe institutional and working environment that enables women to enter, retain, and advance in the energy workforce, to take on leadership roles and receive due recognition for their contributions. We know that this is currently not the case. We have at best 1/3 of women in the labor force of the sustainable energy sector. We expect that sector to grow significantly globally within the next years and decades. And it is of the essence that women can contribute to the growth of this sector on a par with men. Principle 4 is to combat gender blind planning, financing, execution, and implementation of projects, and integrate gender mainstreaming in a cross-cutting manner. Principle 5 recognizes that women and girls in both rural and urban areas are often disproportionately affected by energy poverty, and that therefore targeted actions are required. Principle 6 is to address gender inequalities, barriers, and challenges within the energy sector, and harness women's full potential as economic agents of change and leaders. It's important that we don't look at women as victims. Certainly women are not a minority group that needs to be protected. Women actually are the majority on the globe currently, and they exercise leadership already now, and they prove themselves to be agents of change already now, even though they face discrimination and many hurdles. There are additional principles which I'm not going to quote at this point for lack of time. There was a launch a couple of days ago of the global roadmap for accelerated SDG 7 action that the Secretary General of the United Nations proposed. And I would like to share with you just a few of the visuals that were prepared by the Secretary General and his team in order to accelerate action on SDG 7. The action needs to close the energy access gap. It needs to rapidly transform the energy system by transitioning to a decarbonized energy system. It needs to mobilize adequate and predictable finance. It should leave no one behind on the path to a net zero future. And it requires harnessing innovation, technology, and data. There are some milestones that the Secretary General has defined together with his team. These milestones are quite ambitious. For 2025, the aspiration is that 500 million more people have gained access to electricity and 1 billion more people have gained access to clean cooking solutions. We know that in particular, the issue of clean cooking deserves greater attention because it affects close to 3 billion people. The lack of clean cooking possibilities affects close to 3 billion people on the earth today. Now, these goals of bringing sustainable energy to an additional 500 million people and 1 billion provided with clean cooking obviously requires money. It requires annual investments that are significant. It also needs a redirection of fossil fuel consumption subsidies. It requires an increase in modern renewables capacity globally. We cannot build any more new coal power plants, and we need to build jobs in renewable energy and energy efficiency, additionally to the ones that we have. Now and there, as I said before, it is in the interest of everybody that women can access these jobs on a par with men. For 2030, there are additional milestones. The goal, SDG 7, of course, sets before us the goal that by then universal access to electricity and clean cooking solutions should be achieved. All of that, again, requires major movements, major policy changes in the area of global renewable power capacity, in the rate of improvements in energy efficiency, and in the creation of jobs. In order to achieve these milestones, it is important that action targets in particular the most vulnerable countries, which are in particular African countries, least developed countries, landlocked developing countries, and small island developing states. Gender equality and women's empowerment is of the essence. Secretary General underlines that it must be prioritized, including empowering women in the design, production, and distribution of modern energy services, including for productive uses, as well as equal representation of women in decision-making process in the area of energy. If we achieve these milestones by 2025 and 2030, that will also firmly propel the world towards net zero emissions by the year 2050, which is what we need for the Paris climate goals, while advancing a just, inclusive, and equitable energy transition with universal energy access, green jobs, diversified economies, people's well-being, and the empowerment of women, local communities, and vulnerable groups to leave no one behind. A tall order, but I believe one that is technologically feasible and politically desirable. So we need to make the politics work for these goals, and we need to use the mechanisms that are available in democracies to advance towards these goals. The Global Women's Network for the Energy Transition is, as I said, one of the founding organizations of the Compact on Gender and Energy. We have entered into the Compact as one of our individual self-commitments that we want to increase the mentoring that we are facilitating even more. As of now, we have mentored more than 350 women in various programs, mainly many of them financed by the German government and the GIZ, the Gesellschaft für International Cooperation, but also our programs are also financed by other entities, international organizations, in particular also industry associations that have recognized the value of mentoring to advance women who are already active in the sustainable energy sector. With our mentoring programs, we have reached more than 70 countries. We have a very dynamic pool of mentors. The mentors act pro bono, and in order to support our mentees, we are doing knowledge transfer. We have done webinars. We are now in the process of developing online courses. We organize study tours and have an active story telling campaign online that shows how women can be successful in an environment that a priori is not inviting to them. And the storytelling campaign also shows how this is beneficial, not just to the individual women, how this is not just a way of realizing the human right of women, but also how it is beneficial to the company, to the society at large, to the environment, and really to everybody. With that, I would like to thank you very much for your attention. I have my contacts here and also the website of the Global Women's Network for the Energy Transition. I wish you well for the rest of the conference, and I look forward to interacting with you all through email and hopefully soon again in person.
Welcome. It's me again, Luca Poanga, Professor of Economics and Finance at Regis University. I'm here with Peter and Jason. Jason is a former USTDA official He's now in Denver, and Peter, you already saw him earlier on. So, Jason, what is your observations regarding the presentation so far made?
Dr. Pawanga, again, you've outdone yourself. We grow wiser each year. I enjoy participating. Thank you so much for having me back. It's a complex world, and that's always my intake from your program. Balancing interests, trying to put the pieces together, and you always do such a good job in bringing effective collaborators and intelligent, caring people to the table to do that. So I appreciated the program this morning and yesterday. Dr. Eisen, congratulations and thank you for all your leadership and hard work. We're in this transition period. Obviously, we're watching COP26 unfold and all the negotiations. We're excited about the potential of more holistically kind of tackling these issues. They're social issues. They're based on natural resources. They're based on the impacts and the education knowledge over time of what's happened. And so digging down this morning, looking at the potential for innovation, looking at the potential for leadership in sub-Saharan Africa and partnerships with sub-Saharan Africa. I'm excited about the vision and the intent and the commitments from the professionals that you brought into the program. Dr. Eisen's comments this morning and his work focusing on the local electricity aspects, the potential for microgrids and standards around this, like frameworks, best practices, is so important to attract the investment in, to have the NGOs working with government so that there's consistency. We heard yesterday a lot about the cycles of politics. So having these best practice organizations consistently doing the work through administrations and forming these best practices pockets, so that if there does happen to be uptake in a particular country, that's fostered, that's nurtured, and then that's scalable. So that's what I see in this potential. I'm excited to hear about what the meetings may entail in the coming weeks in Senegal. And again, we know there's a kind of this tension between the developed economies, which we know had a huge impact. There's a report from the Energy for Growth Hub, Todd Moss runs, that shows that 48 sub-Saharan African countries are home to obviously 1 billion people, but they're responsible for less than or around 0.5% of the global CO2 emissions. 0.5%. And Nigeria makes up almost half of that. And we know that South Africa is the 15th largest CO2 emitter in the world. So I'm excited about the grassroots potential of developing these localized best practices. There's a lot of innovation we heard with fintech, trying to incorporate data, the transparency around that, really understanding, again, the balance of natural resource utilization, social impact, equity, sharing the wealth that is developed in any particular larger scale project. We know about the trickle down theories, but we want to ensure trickle down. We want to ensure participation. So I'm excited about the stakeholder process that Dr. Eisen is working with his organization. I can stop there if you'd like me to go further. This is just the first presentation of the morning, but I think I should take a little bit of a breath and throw it back.
Yeah, I think I would like to give the chance to Peter to get his observations apart from his presentation.
Well, thank you very much, Luca. This is very exciting. I have to admit, I'm a novice on your conference. In fact, I wasn't there yesterday, so I can't really make any comments about yesterday. But the participation you have here and the concept which you have used to put this together is very exciting. And I am very, very pleased that you invited me to join you on this. I have the feeling, and this includes also a response to yesterday's presentations, I have the feeling that the requirement of bringing the voice of the people about what type of energy is needed, when and where, and how expensive, and how reliable, and how equitable, and how clean. The voice of the people is extremely important, and I'm very grateful, Jason, that you pointed this out again. I am impressed, for instance, about the presentation which Ambassador Irene Gina Geichel has just made. I mean, there very clearly the participation of women in shaping the local governance is extremely important. I'm reminded of the way in which stand pumps were introduced in Africa about 30, 40 years ago. At that time, we also had the situation that everybody was excited about this technology. Everybody was excited that you can bring water relatively inexpensively into villages, into slums, and so on in Africa. I was at the time director at the World Bank office in Nairobi. And we were surprised why many of these very small investments function very well until we found out, and this is what I would like to tell Ambassador Dina Geichel, until we found out that really the women should participate in the decision making about who is using the water and when and how much, and who is taking care of the repairs and so on, and the hygiene around water, which, for instance, was also used by cattle and so on. So this shows very much that it's not only in the interest of women, which are, after all, half of the population, or if not more. This is in the interest of development. This is the interest of society at large, that women play a role. And I hope that what we are promoting right now, this is a multi-stakeholder approach in local situations for defining the governance which is required for the local access to electricity, that this will also be extremely important. So in many ways, I feel that I'm very comfortable with my message in this very, very powerful group of people, Dr. Ruwapangu, you have brought together. And I hope that out of this will come a relationship with many of the institutions which are participating here. And I must say, we will be very pleased to become a part of many of the projects everywhere in the world, in particular when it comes to local access to electricity in villages, rural, or also in cities and slums and so on. So this is, for me, a very exciting moment, and I'm very thankful that you have invited me and have allowed me to join you here in this very important event, Mr. Kuvangal.
Peter, the pleasure is ours. I want to follow up on the comments that you've made regarding the presentation by Ambassador Irene Gina Raiko concerning women. So in your plan for LEAP, the Local Electricity Access Program, what consideration have you given to women in terms of their role?
Well, in the case of water supply, for a long time, the donor agencies, they went into the village and talked mainly to the men and said, where do you want it? How much do we need for this field? And how much do we need for the school? And how much do we need for the clinic? And so on. But in a way, the women were responsible for carrying the water, you know. They were the ones who had to take care of the health of their families and so on. And we at the World Bank, we very quickly found out that if they were given a strong voice in these localities, suddenly this worked. If not, I mean, I remember one case, I don't want to mention the country, but in one case in a village, there was a cabinet member who lived in this village. So he was a strong man, and he had developed a ostrich farm in that village, which was a very good thing, provide a lot of employment and so on. but he required that most of the water which was provided to the village was available to his farm. And it's very hard in the African reality for the people to resist this. So this is why one has to get them to talk to each other, including in particular the women, to see what is the interest, what is the perspective, what is the need of the other side. So this is very important that civil society, for instance, cooperates with government and the private sector. I heard that Max Gerrit earlier said that this is not antagonistic. Well, I always call it antagonistic cooperation. You know, it is sort of an orthodox term. They have to learn to work with them, even though they have different interests, and they should know that, and they should put themselves into the shoes of the others. And this is in particular important in this magical triangle of good governance. In the case of water supply, the women played an amazing role. It was like opening Pandora's box, you know, it was fantastic.
Excellent. Jason, you said you wanted to continue. So let me see if you can begin from the point of interruption.
Well, I think that the participation, I come from a background of political science, right? So and stakeholder engagement. Having worked in South Africa, there was a lot of process with federal, provincial, local government. You had dissipation and you had lack of communication both ways, right? To move things up and down. So these coordinating bodies, some people would call them, lobbyists, right? In many respects, and I was listening again to the COP26 and how, the fossil fuel industry is just, so prevalent in Glasgow, and and how that is, changing the course of a lot of the discussions, or not, creating a well-rounded approach. So, as we get looking at localization, I'm seeing the same things. There's parallels here in the U.S. economic development context, right? So one of the exciting things that I am seeing through this Build Back Better agenda, and some of the innovations around a lot of the federal government monies that go down to local municipalities, is really the importance of those federal dollars, the decentralization process, to meld the local knowledge and get these buy-ins from the stakeholder participants, and that would include your educational networks, the workforce development initiatives. Huge part of you don't make policy just in Washington. You've got to define that based on geography. So some of the best practices, I see these parallels. We heard from Dr. Vivek Lal on the nuclear side. So those decentralized components, the centralized components, where does it make sense to get, in technology development? A lot of people were dismissive in the time that I was in South Africa, on the intent, the curiosity, the commitment toward, new technology development, and how that fits in the local context. And with champions, with leaders, they can, a lot of people go, just like we go to your bigger cities from rural areas. You bring all that knowledge, you try to make a difference. The young people, want to move into the bigger cities. That's all happening. These parallels are happening. And there's such an important element to how we do economic development here in the United States. Stakeholder alignments, planning, county planning processes, multi-institutional arrangements, getting those analytics done. And, if it's geothermal, when does it make sense to go onto the grid? Where are there opportunities to match a very small scale geothermal with these very progressive fintech microgrid solutions in sub-Saharan Africa? And I would like to see our economic development teams, our economic development administration under the Department of Commerce, working more closely with the foreign International Trade Administration. They're both Department of Commerce agencies, and really matching some of these best practices clusters. They call them clusters of excellence in certain parts of the United States, and matching that with willing people in sub-Saharan Africa. The last thing I'll mention, for now, is on the geothermal side. Kenya is the most productive, geothermal generator in the world. And so we heard a little bit from Mike Farina about this, but I think it's something like 40% of their power is geothermal. It's like 800 megawatts of power. So that level of expertise and same would be with coal transition. South Africa, 85-90% of its generation with coal. We have a lot of expertise to be able to transition from coal. There's I think 120,000 workers in South Africa connected to the coal economy. How do we move these people into other focused areas that are important? And then how does South Africa work with the region, with SADC and so forth, to move this out? So lots to do, as I said, complex.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jason. We'll end it here, but we'll be back after a few presentations.
Thank you.
Mwale Medical and Technology City is a $2 billion sustainable metropolis centered around a state-of-the-art medical and technology complex located within Butere Sub-County, Kakamega County in the Republic of Kenya. Construction began in 2014 and will be complete in December 2020. It comprises of 5 districts being built in 3 phases. Phases 1 and 2 are complete, and Phases 3 is 40% complete. The first district is the Plaza District, which has the mall, a supermarket, Hampton's Cafe Bed and Breakfast, private residential homes, and a 5,000-bed Hampton Hospital, which will treat 12,000 patients per day when fully completed in the year 2020. The second district is the Airport District, which comprises of a convention center, a 35-acre Disney-style water park, and a private international airport, all connected to the 5,000-bed Hampton Hospital via cable car system. The third district is the Grid District, and true to its name, it forms a grid along 3 kilometers of the boulevard between 1st Street and 12th Street and is organized with the natural greenery as well as appointed homes. The fourth district is the Golf District, which hosts the 36-hole Hamptons Championship Golf Course, the largest in Africa, as well as 4,800 homes for doctors, nurses, and other residents of the city. The fifth district is the Industrial District, which has the 144 megawatts waste-to-energy power plant that will convert all hospital and municipal solid waste into clean renewable power. By the end of 2020, the city is expected to be the second largest city in Kenya. Mwale Medical and Technology City, where vision and opportunity meets success.
Welcome to the Energy Africa Conference. And today I'm privileged to have Ambassador Keita, who is the founder and president of Open Business Africa, as well as Bridge of Innovation. My name is Luca Poanga, Executive Director of the Energy Africa Conference and the founder of the Energy Africa Conference. And I'm also a professor of economics and business in the Anderson College of Business and Computing. Thank you, Ambassador.
Thank you. Welcome. Thank you so much. I'm very glad to be here.
Thank you. Now, tell me a little bit about yourself.
Thank you for this extraordinary opportunity that you have given me to make my contribution. I am Keita Sheikh, son of Africa, born in a small country in West Africa, in a village in Victoria, facing the sea, the Atlantic Ocean, and this in the Republic of Guinea, whose capital is Conakry. My country is a geological scandal by the different potential of this agrarian with number two in the world, the bauxite producer in the world. But for me, it is a scandal of the poverty that must be changed. We have to work for that. I am first and foremost an economics and business leaders after a career of more than 20 years in the French administration at the Ministry of the Finance in France. I am appointed ambassador of International Human Rights Commission and ambassador of WOSME, Organization for the Small and Middle Enterprise in the World. I am also founder of OBA. OBA is Open Business Africa, and Bridge of Innovation, BOA, and OPND. OPND is the Pan-African Observatory for Digital for the Development. I am also senator of the WIBEF, and I am membership for the board of CE is the club of the entrepreneurs for the Commonwealth organization. I'm very glad to be here with you. I'm member of the board of the biggest organization who you know for the African Energy Conference. I'm very glad to be here.
And I'm very glad to have you. Now, let's get into the source of the conversation. The African diaspora that is based in America, there are about 39 million people. How can the diaspora be organized to electrify Africa?
The overflow, we need a collective awareness of all these sons in Africa who have now become true their sorry citizens of the country that have welcomed then and transformed their life by simply saying to myself that I come from somewhere that I can bring as contribution to make a positively change this in my country of origin. All diasporas are agents of change and potential ambassador for contribution of development. The diasporas must organize themselves for this priority cause energy, which Conference Energy Africa can create and endorsement find for energy in Africa. Asked all diaspora to contribute, example, for $3 up to €3 per month or per year to allow us to create a technological and economical coalition for energy interested for per years. These ideas that I am launching, we can depend this proposal.
That's a very innovative way of looking at the involvement of the African diaspora into the development of Africa. Now, along the same lines, you've talked about investments. How can the African diaspora contribute to political reforms, poverty reduction, cultural and economic transformation of Africa?
Yes, Luca, you know, I often talk about the economical strength on the diaspora. There is an American company that you know, how which I would not name, which has had development and a greater capitalization and more than to the transfer of the money of the diaspora, which has exceeded the official development. And we must innovate, and the diaspora must stop being a diaspora of systematic protests, except in the case where democracy is fluctuating. It must be a diaspora of qualitative proposal in all important areas: investment potential, reform, poverty reduction, cultural and economical transformation, and the transformation of the continent. But African state and government must innovate in their way of dealing with diaspora. They must create initiatives that make it possible to attract diaspora, qualify the perception, for example, to reduce tax on diasporas, company that return or donate the possibility of accessing the zero loan to buy their home on the death return. That is some proposition, I think, will be very good for the diaspora.
Yeah, and I think, Ambassador, you are very right in terms of talking about how much is remitted by the African diaspora. That comes to about $48 billion a year, roughly the same as the foreign direct investment. And actually, it's close to the aid that is given to Africa. So given this amount of money, and I think you have very good suggestions in terms of reducing the tax. Now, how can this money be leveraged as an investment vehicle in Africa?
Yes, you know, the remittance to African costs around is 12 or 50%, 8% globally. Can Africa? How did the African negotiate to reduce the rate and the importance of super energy investment? You tell me. Yes, it is an injustice that we have denounced for several years, but the solution, in my opinion, must come from digital technology. We must repass. It was be the capacity of your engineers in the digital to create a system of transfer society in Africa by African for the Africans.
That is that's a very good comment. Now, how can we utilize the diaspora to de-risk projects in Africa?
Yes, that is a very good question. You know, we must build trust and restore hope to the diaspora. Is a story the story of Africa, which is a historic relationship with the world. The diaspora can play the role African aspect of its providers that your state include the obligation to involve the diaspora in the project which concern the country, because it's a large reserve of by technician.
My last question: what advice do you have for the diaspora? I know you talked about this at the very beginning. So finally, the parting words of wisdom, what would you advise the diaspora?
You know, the diaspora have to be careful to know, to have the good sense to know what path I'm coming. You know, all diasporas in Europe, in America, in everywhere in the world have to know what country I'm coming. What is the situation of my country? What can do to make my contribution, to give to my country the possibility of contribution to access to the final process to give my contribution of my country. That is very important. All African, all diaspora have to be the really ambassador of the country of Africa to managing knowledge and capacity to bring experience in Africa. But also the government, African government, have to be open to make the essential proposal for the diaspora to bring some ideas and some participation to make development sectors in Africa.
Ambassador, thank you very much for sharing this evening with us. Thank you.
I was very glad to be here. You know, it's possible to do something by himself, but to go far away, we have to take time to work together to make the complementarity. The world is changed. The African country is now in the veritable enjeu for all in the world. Now, African countries have the solution for Africa, and Africa have the solution for the world. You know, maybe tomorrow is the African come to every food from the world, but we have the land. We have all potentiality. Now the African have to take the time, the government of Africa have to take the time to make the process for the transformation. Transformation is not possible to sell every time the products who knows not transform it. We have to take the decision to say, if we have to send my cobalt, we have to transformation and for make the industrial capacity in Africa to make the transformation like battery in Africa before the cell. That is very, very important. And I hope all Africans need to developing in Africa. And I hope that all Africans have to be careful to the cost of the energy in Africa. Our organization initiative, African Energy, we work to that. And we have to open the door for the company who have knowledge and to come with us to open the door in Africa for make the solution and the resolution of this problematic of the energy in Africa.
Yes, my name is Bai Blyden. I'm the CEO of the BBRM Group, and appreciate the invitation to participate in the Energy Africa Conference. My subject today is entitled Energy Development and Connectivity, AI and the Digital Divide. And it is consistent with the theme of the conference where we're looking at energy development solutions. However, there is an even bigger opportunity given the fact that in many ways, you can consider the energy systems required for the economy and the economic potential that Africa has also would produce with that, from the planning of such initiatives, a large amount of very structured and pure data that can in itself create entire new industries. And that's really what the focus is on this. In other words, as we plan for these systems, we can also harness the data associated with the underlying technologies and in turn create another aspect and another dynamic of growth that produces new industries for education and so on and so forth. So this has been lately my area of focus. I've been in this space. My first major publication was in 1983, and I've pretty much looked at a number of things, all the various resources we have in Africa, gas resources, hydro, and even the potential for the controversial nuclear, if you will. And when we say nuclear, I know it's a broad umbrella and everybody assumes, but you have various technologies, especially the small modular nuclear reactors that can be of very useful applications, which would minimize the building out of large grids and transmission systems, which oftentimes on the continent are really very unstable. But for an economy like the size of Nigeria, you almost would have to have, there is no other technology that has that kind of power density for that small footprint. So it all would depend on how you apply and those technologies, for example, and those would be candidates for like dedicated industrial technical parks, which will be a major part of this new developmental footprint. To support, of course, the whole renewable focus that the whole world is trending towards. So it's about a mix. It's not an either-or solution to any of these things. So on top of that, as I was saying earlier, the data aspect of all of this is in itself an umbrella industry that we should take advantage of. And good luck to the rest of the participants of the conference and best of wishes. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Professor Luca. My name is Bachi Balde. I'm the Director of Power Systems Development at the African Development Bank and based here in Abidjan. I will now start my presentation. Today, I'm going to make a presentation about the bank on the theme, Investing in Africa's Energy Future in the New Normal. I will start by giving an overview of the bank group, followed by an introduction of our New Deal for Energy in Africa. I'll then talk about the organization of the Power, Energy, Climate, and Green Growth Complex, or Vice Presidency, and then the bank's financing instruments. And I will conclude by giving a few examples of deals that will be closed. The African Development Bank is the premier development financial institution on the continent that is focused on reducing poverty and improving living conditions on the continent. It is a AAA rated institution by all the major rating agencies. We have three financing windows. The first one is the African Development Bank window, which was established in 1964. That gives, that has been capitalized by over $93 billion and was increased in 2019. And it gives non-concessional loans. The African Development Fund was established in 1972 and has over 36 billion subscribed, and it gives concessional financing to member countries. Over 35 of our member countries need concessional financing from the African Development or ADF window. Last but not the least is the Nigeria Trust Fund that was established in 1976 to also provide concessional and non-concessional financing to member countries. The bank group of strategic framework for energy is anchored on the high fives. And these high fives cut across energy and other sectors. And high five number one is Light Up and Power Africa, followed by Feed Africa, Industrialize Africa, Integrate the Living Conditions of Africans, Integrate Africa, and improve the quality of life for the people of Africa. These strategies are also aligned with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And in this presentation, we've mapped the SDG numbers with the relevant high five priority area. In fact, there's a study that shows that if all the high five goals are met, they would have helped Africa achieve 90% of the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Needless to say that the SDGs and our high five priority areas are all linked and aligned with the African Union's Agenda 2063. The New Deal on Energy for Africa was launched in 2016. And Lighting Up and Powering Africa is the first high five, as I said, because without power, no economy can develop. The targets that were aspirational and set in 2016 was that by 2025 or 2030, we would have mobilized financing to add about 160 gigawatts of new capacity. We would have connected about 130 million new customers on the grids in Africa, and would have also helped to connect over 75 million off-grid connections. Last but not the least, we felt that clean cooking is a neglected area given the cutting of all our forests. So the access to clean cooking is also an important prerogative. And the target there is to have connected 150 million people to have clean access to clean energy for cooking purposes. The Power, Energy, Climate, and Green Growth Complex, or Vice Presidency, otherwise known as PEVP, has 5 directorates. And I sit in the Power Systems Development Department, which focuses on the extension of grid-based power systems, providing technical expertise to power utilities and member countries to help them improve operational performance, and also to strengthen the power pools of which the utilities are members through interconnections, and to establish robust power markets that can facilitate mutually beneficial trade and transition to green growth. The other departments include a renewable energy and energy efficiency department that focuses on off-grid and mini-grid solutions, clean cooking solutions, and energy efficiency. They also run our landmark Sustainable Energy for Sustainable Energy for Africa Fund, which is a $400 million fund that is located in the bank, focusing on renewable energy and energy efficiency. We have a department on financial solutions, policy, and regulation, because you need to set the rules and help member countries to create the enabling environment for private sector investments to take place. Last but not the least, we have the Climate Change and Green Growth Department that focuses on climate change and adaptation. And there we have the National Determined Contribution Hub and also the Global Climate Adaptation Hub to provide support to our member countries to help them access climate finance and align projects with the Paris Agreement and now the Glasgow Agreements. In terms of scale and scope, the ADB has mobilized over 14 billion units of accounts, which is roughly $20 billion in energy projects between year 2000 and 2019. Out of that total of 14 billion UA roughly, the public sector financing took the majority at about 11.1 billion, with 2.7 billion going to private sector operations. We've helped to connect about 560,000 off-grid customers. We've added 18.5 gigawatt of new energy, 5.4 gigawatt of which were from renewable energy sources. We've also helped member countries complete 22,500 kilometers of transmission lines, of which 9,800 are regional interconnectors that facilitate power trade. Last but not the least, we've also helped member countries connect installed 102,000 kilometers of distribution lines. At this juncture, I want to highlight that the energy transition in Africa that is quite topical in Glasgow today has already commenced. Between 2010 and 2019, renewable-based power generation capacity increased by 77%, whilst the energy output increased by 52%. Natural gas-based capacity increased by 112%, and energy output from natural gas also increased by 51%. Coal-based capacity increased by 18% without any significant change in energy output from coal. If you look at the graph at the bottom, you can see that renewable energy will increase from 50 gigawatt capacity to 259 gigawatt in terms of capacity. The total on the left will give you about 225 gigawatt of installed capacity, which is projected to more than double to 474 gigawatt. So that's capacity. In terms of energy, in the middle, renewable energy production or contribution from renewable energy in the energy mix is projected terawatt hours to over 703 terawatt hours. If you take the totals, you will see that energy production in Africa is projected to increase from 853 terawatt hours to just over 1,300 terawatt hours by 2030. So Africa has commenced the transition. Gas is an important transition fuel, and the graph on the right basically shows countries in Africa that have had recent gas discoveries that intend to use their gas value chain, not just for power generation, but also for industrial development. Nigeria being the leader with about 4,500 megawatts of gas to power plant. Senegal and Mozambique are newcomers, and we've invested in the 20 billion LNG project in Mozambique. In terms of lending instruments, the bank has lending instruments that include corporate loans up to 15 years or more, depending on the project, which we lend to our member countries and to private investors. We provide equity, typically not direct equity, but through funds. We also have guarantees and risk mitigation instruments that will improve the bankability of projects. We have technical assistance funds, which are managed internally, like the CEFA fund I mentioned, the NEPAD IPPF, that help to prepare projects through feasibility studies, technical assistance, and other capacity building initiatives. Last but not the least, we've invested in sister companies like Africa 50, which does project development, from project development and concept up to principal investment, both debt and equity. We've also invested in Africa Export-Import Bank, Afrexim, which specializes in trade finance. And also we've invested in the Africa Guarantee Fund, which also helps to provide complementary guarantees to facilitate the bankability of bank projects. In African Development Bank does both sovereign and non-sovereign lending. So on this graph on the right there, for private sector entities, we generally provide lines of credit to financial intermediaries. We do project finance and corporate loans to eligible private sector entities, and also state-owned enterprises that meet certain criteria. In terms of private sector loans, they're typically in middle income countries or all that have access to the ADB non-concessional financing window. For public sector, it can be the ADF window, and some countries are blend countries. So for public sector lending, the maturities are longer, up to 24 years or more, depending on the project. Longer grace periods, rather than 5, you can have 8, etc., etc. And we also do provide local currency loans in some countries. In terms of risk mitigation instruments, we provide partial risk guarantees that cover commercial debt service default obligations, normally for a private sector project when such defaults are caused by a government or government-owned entity and their failure to meet specific contractual obligations of the project. We have provided 5 PRGs through the ADF, that's the concessional window, and I'll talk about the structure in another slide. We also do provide partial credit guarantees, which support government borrowing or public and private sector entities in our member countries. We provide policy-based guarantees, which support borrowing of governments for fiscal support under policy-based loan frameworks, which typically would include sector reform covenants to improve, to provide an enabling environment for investments. These PCGs and PBGs cover part of the debt service defaults, regardless of the cause of default. We have provided over 20 PCGs through the ADB window and 2 PCGs through the ADF window. In terms of loans, we have fully flexible loans for middle income countries which access only the ADB window. And these are typically given to member countries, state-owned enterprises with sovereign guarantees in ADB or blend countries. Blend countries can access both ADB and ADF resources, and they have longer tenors, as I've said before. A good example is the Nur Wazazat CSP, concentrated solar project in Morocco, 580 megawatt, and the bank provided a 100 million euro loan for a total project cost of 634 million euro. This is one of the pioneering CSP projects on the continent, the largest on the continent, and one of the largest CSP projects worldwide. Another example is where we provide standard private sector loans for under project finance structures to public sector companies of ADB or blend countries without a sovereign guarantee, and private companies in all member countries. The typical terms are given there in terms of tenor, grace period, and the interest rate margin. A good example is the Nachtigal Independent Power Hydro Project, 420 megawatts in Cameroon, which is under construction. The bank provided $150 million loan with an 18-year tenor, longer than usual, to make it more affordable, and at a total project cost of 1.2 billion. Obviously, we partner other DFIs like IFC or EDF, etc., to bring these projects to market. Another project finance project that we'd like to highlight is the 100 megawatt Redstone concentrated solar power project in South Africa, which provides up to 12-hour molten salt tower storage technology. And in this case, the loan was in South African rand. The bank provided 3 billion rand at 19-year tenors, also to make it more affordable, with a total project cost of 11 billion rand. The eligibility criteria for project companies are on the left. A company must be incorporated in an African country. The project must meet our environmental and social safeguard standards, and those of the country the project is in. The sponsors must obviously have a track record of success in this type of project with adequate financial capacity and provide evidence of the skills to manage the projects that have been proffered. The projects must be financially viable, and most importantly for us also, the project must have development impact in line with the strategic objectives of the member country or region. On the right-hand side, I've given an idea of this project processing cycle from origination when the project comes to the bank, an exploratory review in terms of early stage engagements with the sponsors and sending them questionnaires, and preparation of a preliminary evaluation note, which then goes through management approval. Once the concept note has been approved, we then proceed on detailed due diligence and appraisal, and then go for board approval. Once the project has been approved by the board, we finalize the documentation and meet the CPs, etc., to achieve financial close and forced disbursement, typically when construction starts. All of this can take 3 to 6 months, depending on the readiness of the project and the time at which we enter. In terms of guarantees, this is another example of an instance where the bank provided a 20 million euro partial risk guarantee to the 310 megawatt Lake Turkana wind farm project in Kenya, which included a 400 kV line far away from the load centers in Nairobi. And the total project cost was 600, well, we mobilized 625 million euro. About 475 million of that was debt. And the project started commercial operations in 2019. This technology used in Lake Turkana was also used in another bank finance project in Cabo Verde, and which was scaled up 10 times in Lake Turkana. So the replicability and scalability of projects, we believe, is very important for our member countries. And we adopt all the lessons learned across all our member countries to keep improving the efficiency and effectiveness of our project management and impact. Oops, I think, yeah, lastly, I'd like to talk about equity investments. Typically, as I said, we do not do direct equity. We typically go through funds, and the eligibility criteria are similar. You must be a financially viable private entity. Typically, public sector assets are in the process of being privatized, and you can have even regional PPP projects, and there are examples of that. We do not take more than 25% ownership in all our equity investments. We insist on board representation with clearly defined exit clauses, which would allow us to exit once the investment has matured. We provide specialized equity for financial intermediaries that lend to SMSEs, small and medium enterprises. In a case in point is the Development Bank of Nigeria, for example. And we also lend to commercial banks and lenders, including AB type loans. I forgot to mention that under the loans. Examples of funds that private equity funds that are in our portfolio that we invested in include the Africa Renewable Energy Fund, Evolution 2 Fund. We also invested in Evolution 1, Climate 1 Investment Equity Fund, and Africa Renewable Power Fund. The geographies include various regions in Africa depending on the fund, and each of them focuses in an area that they've been mandated to invest in. We do have funds that also invest in off-grid solutions, like the Facility for Energy Inclusion Fee. It's not on this presentation, but it's on our website, that can lend money to distributed energy projects focused on distributed energy solutions. Here I focus on the grid-based projects. In terms of technology, the bank generally promotes renewable energy technology where viable, and if that is not possible or is not economically viable, we then consider alternatives to renewable energy. At the bottom, I've shown the bank contribution in each of these funds. It can take the form of principal equity or junior equity or ordinary equity. Thank you very much.
Regis University has been the catalyst to all of my success. I appreciate the education that I have, the distance learning, the online process, and that was another fundamental part why I continued from my bachelor's to my master's. It has changed my life to the core.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the 14th edition of Africa Energy Conference. We have here today with us Danny Friedrich, co-founder and CEO of Pineberry, and Dario Traverso, co-founder and CEO of Genius Water. We are going to talk today about innovation in the access to energy space, and especially in the mini-grid space. Genius Water is producing innovative solar purification system through reverse osmosis, and they have a very interesting offer for the mini-grid developers. On the other hand, Danny with Pineberries are producing a software that they call Everything as a Service, which promise to integrate all the technological aspect of a mini-grid. So welcome, everyone. So Danny, perhaps would you like to introduce your company, please, and yourself as well?
Yeah, thank you, Claudio, for having me here. Yeah, so my name is Danny Friedrich. I'm basically in this industry sector for over 10 years. So I'm home here, and I think I will stay here. So what Pineberry does is we call it a everything as a service platform. So it's a all-in-one platform for energy access players in this specific industry sector. So we help our customers to run their business in one central integrated platform. And in a nutshell, we help our customers to scale their revenues and also their impact for sure. So that's in a nutshell what Pineberry does.
And when are you based, Danny?
We are a German-Kenyan startup. So we have 2 offices. Basically, we have a lot of team members all around the world, so to say, but these are the 2 offices.
Thank you, Danny. Dario.
Yes, hello, Claudio. I'm Dario Traverso from Italy, and Genius Water is a startup established in 2018 with the goal to provide access to clean and affordable water to remote communities as well as to private clients in emerging countries. And our solutions are fully powered by solar energy. And in solar energy, it is where we have the strongest background, because this year we celebrate our 40th year of experience in this sector, especially of my father Franco, who started in 1981 producing solar cells, modules, and then systems in Africa from Kenya, Burundi, Tanzania, and so on. So we were gonna explore later on how we are harvesting at the maximum efficiency energy coming from the sun to make something that is as valuable as a resource, which is water.
Thank you, Dario. 40 years of experience is something. So Genius Water is a startup, but it's very well positioned for the future. And Danny, Would you like, please, to go a little bit in the details of your product offer and explain us what is about and what you can do for mini grid developers and other customers?
Yeah, sure. So basically, maybe I start from where we come from. So before Pineberry, we were Mango Solar, and at this time we basically built solar home systems. So we were in Kenya and we developed solar home systems, and then the challenge was to bring these solar home systems into the last mile, so to say. So at this time we developed our own software solution, which was basically managing the customers, the payments, and everything that is basically required to bring the product to the last mile. So then in 2020, we basically saw that the complete market will need these solutions. Not only solar home system distribution, but we also were talking with other stakeholders in the market. So we were talking to mini grid developers who have their mini grid and want to install their smart meters in the household. We have the solar home system manufacturers who want to distribute their solar home systems and other applications like TVs and radios and so on. And then we suddenly also talked to other technology providers, like companies also like Genius Water, like Dario's companies who provide water as a service. And then we were talking to companies who have cooling and e-mobility and all these different companies. So that's basically in a nutshell how it became a everything as a service platform. So we're now working with these different stakeholders together. So we basically help them to sell electricity faster in the first place, but then also manage different products and services, manage the payments, whether it's cash collection or mobile money or debit card or credit card, and then also managing their workforce and their customers and everything in one place, so to say. So what we do is we convert a product, let's say a cold storage, into a service. So we make it a cooling as a service or a milling as a service for agricultural processing. And now recently we're also talking to the e-mobility sector, where we have electrical bicycles, electrical motorcycles, and offering a service in this sector, so to say. So yeah, we're bringing all these stakeholders on one platform and managing basically, or helping them to manage the business at one central place and unifying these solutions.
Great. So Danny, imagine I am a mini grid developer. Do you mean that I can only use Pineberry software rather than using the many software that my team has to set up in order to manage my asset in Africa?
Yes, so that's why several of mini grid providers come also to us. They say they have so many different software solutions. It's hard to track. Some even tell us they're doing in some processes paperwork. And what we do now is offering them all these solutions in one place. And what we also say to mini grid providers is, okay, now you sell electricity, and what you mentioned also in the introduction is what we say, why not selling services or make productive use of energy? And as we all know, there are different opportunities, whether it's water or cooling or other agricultural processings.
Thank you, Danny. Dario, tell us a little bit about the technology of Genius Water, reverse osmosis. What is that? Yes. What is needed for, and how Genius Water managed to innovate in this space?
Yes, well, by the way, I think Danny and Pineberry, I think that your solution, your technology is really synergical with what we are doing, as well as what many other companies are doing. So definitely it's something that it's more and more needed in the future. So let's say that we were talking about 40 years of experience in solar energy. We have harvested, let's say, this experience to innovate and to design and engineer and also patent a solution, a containerized solution that allows us to basically pump, purify and desalinate any kind of water, so seawater, brackish groundwater, rather than contaminated water, to make it available, to make it potable and also available for irrigation purposes in anywhere, basically. The whole system is fully powered by solar energy without any need of batteries. And the core of the innovation is basically the combination of two technologies that have not been meant to be combined, which is the water purification and desalination technology that is, as you said, based on reverse osmosis, that has been already in the market and have been used for decades. But the way it has been engineered is by operating to 24 hours a day, constant frequencies, while we have another source that is, when we have another source like the sun, this is totally not, let's say, stable. It is only available during daytime, and it can have and be affected by very big fluctuations. So the two technologies really do not match together. They're not so much friends. And the innovation is about combining these two technologies through a number of valves rather than variable frequency inverters, special motors and pumps, in order to make a water desalination and purification system to operate fully in sync with the sun, okay? And again, without batteries, which is clearly the core of the innovation. Having no batteries means having, for sure, a lower capex, but also lower OPEX and also longer lifetime of the system, because we know batteries, even though for sure innovations will come also in that sense, but still they don't have such a long lifetime, like for instance solar photovoltaic energy and systems. So these systems are technically wise, I would summarize like this. They are, I would say, modular. Okay, so we can treat from a few cubic meters per day up to thousands of cubic meters per day. They are fully autonomous. So thanks to a PLC and software that we developed, the systems operate in sync with the sun, as I was saying, fully autonomously. So without the need of anyone to be operating the plant. They are fully remotely monitored and managed, which is essential when we are talking about remote areas. And what I mean by fully remotely monitored and managed is that we control over 50 parameters of the system in real time, which means that we have a real picture of what is going on. This allows also, of course, to have preventive maintenance, troubleshooting, and a number of, let's say, things that allow us to make sure that these systems will perform at very high efficiencies for the very long term. Okay, because this is our mantra, to have something that is reliable and resilient in harsh locations. Okay, and so everything has been designed according to this mantra. Okay, so that our systems will operate for, we say, 30+ years in these areas. Clearly, the beneficiaries can be rural communities, for instance, that are in need for drinking water. And I mean, we know that there are more than 2 billion people in the world that are lacking access to clean drinking water, and this is a number, unfortunately, that is going to increase. Other beneficiaries can be farmers. As the systems that we have been making, for instance, in Cape Verde, whereby clearly they can irrigate their lands with clean water and affordable, most importantly, hospitals, refugee camps, rather than also the private sectors such as industry, like mines, for instance, rather than hotels and resorts, whereby we have actually developed a special package to provide energy, water, so clean water, hot water, for the showers, for even the pools, etc. Everything in one solution that harvests the maximum possible the solar energy available.
Dario, I hear about water purchase agreement, and I hear about low interest loan. I'm quite sure this will trigger the interest of the developer, because those are very attractive offer in a sector where we are constantly on the research of finance solution to deploy asset especially in sub-Saharan Africa. Perhaps it's worth to mention, Dario, which are the area of most interest for you and for the developers. Definitely, I guess, all the coastal area where there is seawater to be desalinated, which it's a perfect fit with the reverse osmosis, and which are the other regions in Africa that could have a need typically to have water treated with your technology.
Oh, well, thank you for the question. First of all, let me say that Genius Water is present at first in Cape Verde, where we made all our, let's say, hands-on experience, because we didn't want to be only in Italy, with a different context. We wanted to be in the real context, and therefore we developed everything in Cape Verde. But then we are present in several other countries from East to West Africa. So let's say, I would say Sub-Saharan Africa mainly. I'm currently in Nairobi, by the way. I was in Malawi, Tanzania 1 month ago, and I'm going to be in Mozambique. So we're really expanding in several areas, not only coastal areas, and I'll explain you why. We are also, for instance, present in Latin America, with several in several parts. So it's not only about coastal areas, because on coastal areas clearly we have the seawater available, and most often the communities along the coastal area are really lacking from access to clean water. But also, let's not forget that when we talk about desalination, we are not only talking about seawater desalination, but also about brackish water desalination, which means that water that is most often groundwater, but also can be lake water or also rivers that have increased in salinity due to a number of reasons, from the climate change effects, intrusion from the sea, reduction of rains, etc., and making this water increasing in its let's say minerals. Okay, not salt is general, of course, minerals and contaminants that prevent it to be drinkable, but also to be usable for irrigation purposes. Because when you irrigate with brackish water, then you're just gonna destroy the soil and reduce by over 60%, and this is a real fact that we see, the crop productivity. So these solutions are really can be placed and located not only on coastal areas but also inland. Okay, where there is a water, there is a source of water that is not, let's say, clean, that it's not let's say suitable for the need. Clearly, there are a lot of groundwater fresh resources. Okay, in that case, we would mainly need to only do solar pumping. But solar pumping is something that we know how to do it since the early 80s, but it's not something where we are, I would say, focusing, because our technology that we have developed, it's really on the treatment of water. So really, it can be most often inland, where actually the need also is.
Great. Thank you, Dario. Thanks a lot. Danny, if I am a mini-grid developer and I knock the door of Pineberry and I tell you, okay, I want to use your software, I want to try. What's your offer? What's your business model? How do you work with mini-grid developers and other customers?
Thank you, Claudia. So basically, first thing is we say, use our software and try it. So at least 1 month, depending on the business context, or even longer. Just test it and see whether it's basically useful to you. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, for sure, we need to be able to use the equipment of the mini-grid developer. So we need to connect the equipment, like the smart meters, to our cloud to make it basically work with our services. So we work with different manufacturers together in this context. So it's smart meter energy providers or manufacturers. So we are like, for instance, Kali Meter. We work together with them. They have gas and water metering as well as energy metering for sure. And these products can now be connected to the cloud. So the overall approach also for these productive use cases is that we say connect your product first. So what we do is we provide a little piece of electronics or a little piece of software to make a product pay-as-you-go ready, or make it ready to be connected with our cloud. So that means, let's say you have a cold storage, and we make your cold storage ready to be connected with our cloud. You have a water desalination system. We provide you a little piece of software or a little piece of electronics, and we can then connect it to our services. Or a solar home system, or any product, as I said in the beginning. So that's the first thing, connect the product. And the second thing is that a mini-grid provider can then customize the software to the needs. As Dario said also, there's no one, every business case is different, and there are many solutions. So basically, we leave it up to the customer. The customer can then add the products they need, the service they need. They can set up the pricing. They can set up the tariffs. And then they say, okay, in this area, I want to have cash collection. In another area, I want to have mobile money. And in this area, I want to have a credit card, or all together. So it's basically made to work in Uganda, but also in Ghana or in South Africa. So these are the things. And now we're also working on customizing or giving our customers the possibility to customize the logo and the colors. So you can now put your own logo inside, you put your colors, and then the app will also look like it's your own. So yeah, and then you're basically ready to go. The finance, the pricing model itself is pay per use. So we work with a lot of entrepreneurs together. So you test it, you start with it, and then we make it pay per use. So when you have 5 products in the cloud, you pay for 5 products. If you have 1 million products in the cloud, you pay for these 1 million. So the core of our business is basically, if our customers are successful, then we are also successful. So that's in a nutshell what we offer and the process behind it when someone comes to us.
Great, thank you very much. The last point. Let's imagine I am operating a microgrid on the Lake Victoria, and I just closed a water purchase agreement with Dario and Genius Water. And on the other hand, I just tried Pineberry software, and I want to use that as well. So my question is, guys, how can we work together? Can you integrate the two systems together so that I can use Pineberry software on one hand, so I can keep on using the hardware and the setup that I have with the smart meters and all the other I have there. But also I want to manage and monitor the operation of and also the selling of the water, of the Genius Water assets. Will that work, and how long will it take to integrate the system together if it's needed?
Yeah, so maybe one question you asked in the beginning was what is your innovation? So I would say our innovation is basically to work together also with the innovative companies like Darius. So it's for sure we do the software and we integrate all these different solutions, but there would be no solution if there wouldn't be companies like Darius. So yeah, we usually so customization is very important for us. So let's say, so Dario mentioned they have their own solution so far, so it doesn't make maybe sense to then invent the wheel again. So what we then say is we can take this software part, which is developed in for this example by Dario, by Genius Water, and then we can basically put this on our platform as well. So we would basically have the payment customer solutions of Pineberry, and then have very specialized solutions that are on the side of Genius Water put on that platform, so to say. Yeah, basically the approach is for sure we can do that if Dario is interested. So usually it can take 1 week, depending on the solution. It can also take, let's say, 1 month, but it really depends on the product side, on the technology our manufacturers are using. So if it's plug and play, it takes 1 week. If it's a little bit more complicated, it takes a little longer, but that's usually the time frame we're working with manufacturers.
Okay, Dario. So Pineberry it's available to integrate very quickly. So is Genius Water responsive as well?
Let me reply by saying this. I think that when you have control over your technology, then you can have the flexibility really to adapt to a number of situations, and the flexibility that is needed to engineer something that makes the 1 + 1 = 3, right? Not 2. So combining technologies whereby also one technology and one provider is expert and efficient in one specific thing and the other one in the other specific thing, the combination usually is something that it's better, really. So I'm happy to hear what Danny is saying, because I understand they have a deep knowledge in the whole development and software and let's say the IT part, and thanks to this they have it was possible for them to gain this flexibility to make everything as a service, right? And to work with the providers in different areas, maybe totally different, but being able to adapt to their needs, okay? Because any customer will have each, different needs. And on our side, knowing how to manage energy, to treat water, and to make use of this energy in different ways, and to have a full control on our systems, make us as well, let's say, adaptable to integrate solutions that are, for instance, the Pineberry solution. So I don't see really, I see only positive aspect in this, and especially because of the fact that today we are in the era of data, right? So data is the one of the most important things to have and to provide downstream as well as upstream, right? So definitely, I don't see any complexity. I mean, for sure there are going to be complexities, but no complexities that cannot be solved with people who know what they're talking about. So definitely open to move this work forward.
Great. Thank you very much. So we look forward to see your solution in the field more and more, and how your solution can innovate the energy space in Africa, particularly the mini-grid space. So thank you very much to Dario Traverso, founder and CEO of Genius Water, and Danny Friedrich, co-founder and CEO of Pineberry. Thank you very much.
Every faculty has inspired me. They've inspired me to pursue more, and they inspire us, like in the classroom, to really think more, think critically, and also aspire for more.
It's really awesome to be here. It didn't even feel like school, it just felt like a journey. This was an amazing program. It was very reflective. It was eye-opening. I feel like I grew so much.
Just the Regis experience as a whole, I've loved it. I'm going into a very technical field that I can make a really big impact in and honestly change the world.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the African Energy Conference 14th edition. This is the technical panel, and we are going to address technological innovation in the access to energy space. So I have the pleasure today to welcome Sandra Litz-Hong from H2 Energy. Welcome, Sandra.
Hello, good afternoon to everyone. My name is Sandra Hon from HT Energy, and we are actually an integrated solution provider specialized on hydrogen energy storage.
Thank you, Sandra. Thank you. Thank you very much. Then we have Greg Kushnir from Oakland, founder and CEO of Emerald. Welcome, Greg.
Thank you very much, Claudio, and thank you very much for inviting me to the panel. I hope the listeners will enjoy the conversation, and I already enjoy the conversation with the other panelists.
Great. Thanks for being here, Greg. And then we have Carlo Brovero, founder and CEO of Storen Technology from the US. Welcome, Carlo.
Hello, hello, Claudio. Thanks for the invitation and the opportunity of presenting at the panel. And I'm happy to having this opportunity of telling you more about us and our technology.
Great. So I was mentioning that these three companies are proposing some very interesting and some very nice innovation to the access to energy space, and what they have to offer promise to really disrupt this market. So I would like you to please very quickly introduce your technological innovation to our audience. Perhaps, Greg, you can start quickly to introduce your innovation, but firstly yourself as well and your company.
Sure. So my name is Greg Kushnir. I'm the founder and CEO of Emerald. I'm I guess a serial tech entrepreneur I was studying for a PhD when I had an idea for a startup. So that's how it all happened. Emerald, the company I founded, is really trying to revisit an old idea that actually was introduced to the world by Tesla over 100 years ago, Nikola Tesla. What we are doing is reimagining the way that energy is sent and used. We have other people here on the panelists that are dealing with some other factors of the energy triangle. Right? You have generation, storage, and transmission, and there's some fantastic work done in generation, sustainable generation. Fantastic work done in storage with, for example, with vanadium flow batteries. Very little work has been done on transmission. So if you believe that the world is going sustainable, if you believe that the world is going electric, our current infrastructure is just not suitable. And we already know, Claudio, you know very well that some communities, even now, are left behind, even before the world goes electric. They already don't have access to reliable, cheap, and hopefully green energy. And this is what we are changing with Emerald by cutting the wires, essentially going wireless. We are into long-range wireless energy transmission, not the sort of thing that charges these devices, but hundreds of meters, many kilometers, and transmission or distribution level of power. That's what we do.
Wow, that's really something amazing, and I look forward to hear more in the next minute. Sandra from Asia, please tell us about your technological innovation that you have to offer to the access to energy space. Please, Sandra.
Thank you, Claudio. Well, my name is Sandra Horn. I'm the Executive Director of H2 Energy. We have renamed ourselves to H2 Energy to align to our energy storage medium, hydrogen. And how do we come about in the inception of HT Energy? It was in 2017 when we were given an opportunity to look into the rural electrification of clinics in East Malaysia, Sarawak, that is a part of the Borneo Island. And during that opportunity, we realized the various challenges that the existing technology are facing. For example, gensets, diesel gensets. You need to do a regular distribution of diesel, which is challenging for rural side because of the challenging terrain, the weather, and so forth. So it makes energy generation very, very costly. Of course, there was also battery to be introduced. However, battery also have its limited lifespan, where you need to constantly have a replacement budget after 5-6 years, and that make it very, very challenging for the policymaker to continue with such program in place for whether it's the clinics, the schools, or the villages. So when we propose the hydrogen as a medium, and the source of water is just clean water from the site, going through the electrolysis to break down the H2O and harvest the hydrogen, which will be used to power the clinics during at night, or even intermittence of the solar power. And that actually it's how would I say, it is a new revolution for the clinics actually, to ensure sustainable supply of electricity without depending on the weather, the logistics supplier, to ensure that the diesel arrive on time. Our showcase in Malaysia would allow us also to extend to countries like Africa and other Southeast Asia country, where they are also similarly facing the same challenges. And we are grateful on that. Thank you so much, Claudio. Through the ARE, Alliance of Rural Electrification, given us the opportunity to extend our so-called technology across the border.
Thank you, Sandra. Thank you very much. Carlo, you're working on storage technology. Please tell us about vanadium redox flow.
Yes, absolutely. My name is Carlo Brovero. I'm one of the founders and CEO of Storage Technologies. We are a company incubated at the Cleantech Incubator at Stony Brook University in Long Island, New York. We've been there since our incorporation as a company. Well, the pain that we are trying to address, we are trying to offer a battery technology that has advantages or addresses the disadvantages of existing battery technologies. The flow battery technology has some demonstrated fundamentals, some proven characteristics, And we are building on those, trying to add economical development, technological development with the purpose of improving performance and reducing cost of the battery. It's a technology that's at the beginning of the development cycle, and therefore we think that there is ample room for technological improvements. Later on, if you want, during the panel, I'll be happy to maybe drill down into the advantages that our technologies has over, for example, lithium batteries.
Thank you very much, Carlo. Greg, transmitting electrical power through the air without cables. This is amazing, and it's even something that is hard to believe because it's an innovation that is really promised to be disrupting for the market. Can you please tell us in very easy word how that works and how you are actually already testing that technology, how that transmission is already happening?
So the basic technology that we are using, the fundamentals of this technology have been toyed around with. Space agencies actually looked at it in the 60s, 70s. It started with NASA, later on with the Japanese Space Agency. Their focus was really on space applications. The way this technology works is by on the transmit side, it's very similar to radar technology. So we take electricity and turn it into an electromagnetic beam. We shape that beam just like radar do into a collimated beam, which goes parallel and pretty far out. And on the receiving side, we convert it back or rectify it back into electricity with a device that is usually referred to as a rectenna or rectifying antenna. So the big breakthrough really in this technology, as I've mentioned, the concept is not new. The big breakthrough came with really with the computing power of recent years, the ability to model new wave patterns, new materials, metamaterials, is really what allowed this breakthrough to happen in recent years. So that's essentially how the technology works. Obviously, it's a bit more complicated than that, but that's the basics of it. Transmitting in the middle and then rectifying it.
That's amazing. Thank you very much, Greg. Sandra, would you like to explain to us the advantage of using hydrogen technologies in the access to energy space, like you are already doing in Malaysia? What is the advantage of using that kind of technology versus other technologies that are already used?
And why is this system beneficial to the rural sites? Well, when you are in absence of, how would I say, when you are in the absence of a good road to your location, when you have challenges terrain, it is very important that the system will be independent in the sense it is independent, as I mentioned earlier. You just need clean water to jumpstart the electricity, to power the electricity through solar panel, which is easily available in many locations in Malaysia. And the things that what we have done, we also have scaled it down in the way that you just need clean water. So as the people living in the rural side, they don't have to be too technological. They don't have to have high technology knowledge. It's very user friendly in that sense that even the clinic technician be able to manage and operate the system by just pouring in like about 21 bottles of clean water into the electrolysis, and to ensure the smooth running of the hydrogen power module at the system. So it's small footprint, very small footprint, which means if you are, even if you do not have big space, like you don't need to put a big space for a powerhouse. It's a standalone system, so you can even put into a container, or you can just build a very small powerhouse to fit it in. So that is also one of the key things. And of course, being clean and green, Claudio, is very important, as today we are all promoting zero emission, contributing towards the zero goals and initiatives that everyone is working towards. So it is compact, it is user friendly, and it's also clean and green. So that's the key benefits actually for location, and sustainable 24/7. That is also key. The whole system, it is sustainable and a reliable system. So I hope that sum it up, Claudio. I may need to recut it also. I'm not too sure. I hope I did answer your question.
It does answer my question. Thank you very much, Sandra. And Carlo, please, would you tell us about your innovation?
Sure, and to illustrate what the vanadium redox flow batteries are, I'll start from the name. So this category of batteries are called flow batteries because differently from other technologies, for example, like lithium, the electricity is not stored into the electrodes, but the electricity is stored into a liquid electrolyte. There are therefore two tanks, a positive tank, a negative tank, and two circuits that allow the electrolyte to flow, hence the name, through a stack, which is a magic black box where the ion exchange takes place. They're called vanadium flow batteries because in our electrolyte, which is primarily water-based and therefore is non-flammable and non-explosive, the metal that stores the energy is in fact vanadium. And the vanadium stores the electricity or the energy through the ability of having different states of oxidation, hence the name redox. The technology has some advantages over competitive batteries like lithium. For example, the duration. Our batteries can last over 20,000 cycles. They can discharge fully down to zero without any damage to the chemistry of the battery itself, and they retain their capacity throughout lifetime, which is of course one of the problems that the lithium technology has, the fact that the capacity of the battery can decay very, very rapidly. As I was mentioning earlier, is a technology that has ample room for technological development because it's starting now. We are starting now, and therefore we are not a mature technology, but we are potentially enjoying several advantages in the future, coming from improvements of components like membranes, electrodes, and so on. We target applications that are normally fulfilled with lithium and lead acid batteries, and we think that we are a longer lasting, more environmentally friendly alternative to those technologies. The only disadvantage, because of the water content, is that our batteries are heavier and bulkier than lithium, therefore they are ideal for stationary applications.
Sandra, your technology and your application, how do you? What is your proposal to the companies that are working in the access to energy space? Are you looking to sell technologies and or you are implementing a project directly by yourself? What is your offer to the market?
Thank you, Claudio. As my earlier sharing with you all, that we we commence our business through rural electrification for clinics. We will continue to focus on this area because we have successfully scaled down a standalone system of about 25 to 35 kilowatt, even right up to 50 kilowatt, which means it's a scalable and customizable system for small capacity requirement for rural terrain, rural environment like clinics and schools. However, in recent time, we are also been approached by the Ministry of Rural Development to extend this to villages. So we have to scale it up because villages have different user pattern. Unlike clinics and schools, they operate during a certain fixed hours from morning maybe to afternoon. So you can actually quite easily manage the capacity with the current design that we have. However, come to village, you have peak loads in the morning and in the evening. So that's where the technical team have actually looked at how we can bring down the cost down by integrating a short-term storage system just to meet the peak requirement. So these are our offerings for the different user in the rural. That means the schools, the clinics, which have a very fixed pattern of consumption compared to villages which have various peak load that we need to manage. And we are also open to integrate it into mini grid, which we are already in talk also with the utility company. So how do we propose our system? Typically, for what we have commenced now, we work very closely with the government. We work very closely with the various ministry to provide them this solution. It's either through an outright of sales or through power sales. So these are the two offerings that we provide to our clients. However, with many countries rolling out their hydrogen roadmap, especially carving out a hydrogen valley in like Portugal, in Australia, which we are also working closely to explore those opportunities, that has actually challenged us to look beyond the current capacity that we have and go beyond a slightly megawatt capacity right up to between 1 to 5 megawatt to cater for requirements like the mines, where the consumption patterns will be very much more higher than the current facilities in the rural sites and the settlement. And also given opportunity to look at telco tower also. So this is our long-term plan to first position ourselves, strengthen ourselves in the space that we are, where we have started off in the rural sites, and then slowly scaling it up to more other commercial clients like telco tower, the mines, the farmlands, where the requirements are different. So it's still an ongoing, R&D that the team is taking on, because we need to constantly improve the architect of our design. So that's the best part of it, is the flexibility of the system, where we can actually customize it to meet this requirement. However, we are also mindful when we come to commercial clients, unlike the governmental clients, where their main objective to ensure that electricity are provided to the rural facilities and the rural settlement, whereby commercial clients are very much driven by cost. So that's why we are still working with the manufacturer on how best to bring down the cost. So sure. That is actually our future roadmap, Claudio.
Great, thanks Sandra. Carlo, your technology, how can that positively impact the access to energy sector, and what is your offer to the sector?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, let's talk about a scenario like Africa. At the moment, mini grids are equipped with primarily, lead acid or lithium batteries that have a short duration, particularly if operated at temperatures that are very, very high, and represent also an environmental challenge due to the lack of dedicated recycling facilities. So our offering is an alternative to that, a battery that has a very, very long duration, that is close to 100% recyclable, that uses vanadium, that is a metal, for example, that is available in Africa. One day it would be possible to imagine, for example, the electrolyte production carried out in Africa using local vanadium. The manufacturing process for our batteries is a manufacturing process that doesn't require massive investments, and therefore we are talking at the moment to possible partners in the African continent to use a mixed model whereby we supply them with the stack. So the stack is the core of the technology that will be manufactured in the United States. But we license the rest of the manufacturing, for example, the tanks and the assembly, to local companies. We think that this could be a very virtuous model, whereby not only we would be making the access to electricity easier and cheaper for the community, but we would also be creating jobs and some kind of supply chain for the technology. Our offering is real in the sense that we tested our prototype. We already sold some commercial batteries. Now we're transitioning into volume manufacturing, and therefore we are in the position of supplying batteries already. And I don't know, Claudio, whether you had a later question about cost, but if you do, I'll wait for you to ask the question.
Carlo, please tell us now what is the price per kilowatt hour that you expect to deliver with your technology?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'll use a reference point that a lot of people are familiar with, a small battery for a residential application, and that's the Tesla Powerwall, for example, in the United States, that at the moment retails at about $600 per kilowatt hour. Our battery is bigger than the Tesla Powerwall. It's 2.2 times the size. However, the price per kilowatt hour that we target is a little bit higher than the Powerwall. We're talking about probably $750 per kilowatt hour. But there is this kind of confusing habit in the battery world of comparing benchmarking technologies using the cost per kilowatt hour indicator, because this indicator doesn't keep the duration of the battery into account. So if we use the cost per cycle indicator, that in our way is more representative, because it's the ability of the batteries to complete a cycle, one charge and one discharge, considering that our batteries last in excess of 20,000 cycles, don't lose capacity over time, as opposed to lithium batteries that experience very fast decay. Our cost per cycle is probably at the moment already 75% lower than the one of a comparable residential lithium battery.
Well, I wish to thanks very much everyone. Greg Kushnir from Auckland, founder and CEO of Emerald. Sandra Leeds-On, CEO of HT Energy from Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. and Carlo Brovero, founder and CEO of Storen Technology. Where are you actually in the US, Carlo?
We are at Stony Brook University in Long Island, New York.
In New York. Thank you very much, everyone, and we look forward to see your innovation.
Thank you all.
In the field.
Thank you all.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
My name is George Abu.
Hello, I'm Sherry Plants-Masters, and I'm the Dean of the Anderson College of Business and Computing, where we integrate business and computing education to build a better world. Regis University formed the Anderson College of Business and Computing in May of this year. The Anderson College pursues innovation through our capabilities, through the expertise of our faculty across the disciplines of business and computing, through collaboration across and between those disciplines, and through our intentional focus on inclusion. Regis University is an innovator in higher education. In the 1970s, Regis University pioneered an accelerated learning model designed to meet the needs of the adult learner who juggled work and family priorities while pursuing a degree. In the 1990s, Regis University embraced online delivery of education, offering degrees across many disciplines, including MBA, which quickly grew to one of the largest in the nation and produced thousands of graduates. In 2010, Regis University was the first institution to offer fully online ABET accredited degrees in computer science and computer information systems. Regis University was the first in the region and one of the first in the nation to offer a master's degree in data science, which is the largest in the region. And now Regis University is the first to integrate business and computing education into a single college to meet the changing dynamic needs of the business world. Students across the college, from accounting and management to computer science and software engineering, benefit from college-wide outcomes. Graduates learn to approach problems from a systems perspective, assessing and evaluating solutions to assure that they meet the needs of a system. They learn to use data and analytics for informed decision-making. We prepare students and graduates for careers through experiences that help them develop their skills, capabilities, behaviors, and attitudes, as well as a commitment to community. And graduates develop an awareness of and a commitment to the common good and to building a sustainable future through the foundation of a Jesuit education. Thank you.
Regis University has been the catalyst to all of my success. I appreciate the education that I have, the distance learning, the online process, and that was another fundamental part why I continued from my bachelor's to my master's. It has changed my life to the core.
Welcome. This is Luca Poanga again, the Executive Director of the Energy Africa Conference, as well as Professor of Economics and Finance at Regis University in the Anderson College of Business and Computing. I have two people here at this moment, Ryan as well as Michael Farina. Michael Farina being a member of the advisory board and also a previous sponsor of this conference and also a speaker. Ryan, you have some things that you wanted to tell us.
Well, you know, just Dr. Pawanga, one, thanks for having me in. Which is a successful Energy Africa Conference 2021. It was great to hear a lot of the speakers. I think one of the things that I would just underline or underscore, if you will, or point out is just, this idea that sustainability, when it comes to unlocking the potential for investment in the continent of Africa as it relates to energy, unlocking this potential, I think will be directly tied to sustainable investments, sustainable financing, and the ability for businesses or those seeking investment to integrate sustainability and, more specifically, what's called environmental social governance, or ESG, into their investment thesis and or projects that they are seeking to deliver. And a big part of that is understanding what's happening across the world. And that is that asset owners and asset managers, everybody from your pension funds, your large pension funds and sovereign wealth funds, as well as your asset managers, whether it be the BlackRocks of the world or the Goldman Sachs or a number of other institutions who have or capital allocators, are looking actively across the U.S., across the world, to find those investments that align with that sustainability and ESG integration, if you will. And for those who aren't as familiar with it, I would encourage folks to get to understand what ESG is, how it relates, how it can be integrated. There are a number of resources that are available, everything from the work that's being done by the UN-backed Principles for Responsible Investment to the standards and metrics being set by industry organizations like the Sustainability Accounting Standards Board. But they are very focused on the interest of investors and companies, and they are focused on the types of factors as it relates to sustainability that both attract investment and drive long-term value creation. So I share that because I think that's a very important thing for more and more folks to be aware of, is that when you're looking at where funds are flowing and where dollars are looking to go, it's very much tied to sustainability, and environment is a very big piece of that.
Interesting.
Thank you. Yeah, let me turn to Michael. Michael has been a friend to the Energy Africa for quite a long time, both as a sponsor, as a speaker, and recently as a member of the advisory board for the Energy Africa conference. Michael, your observations.
Well, thank you, Luca, and again, another fantastic day of the conference. My personal interest is that we really appreciate what Regis University does in this space, and have some family connections there. But professionally, as part of Baker Hughes, which is an energy technology company, I really found today's sessions quite interesting in terms of the range of stuff that we're talking about, from the nuclear, of course, my contributions on the geothermal side. But as you got into some of the discussions around, electrification and the role for energy storage, long duration energy storage, as discussed by Claudio's panels, and then some of the smaller applications like the energy water nexus that is described between what Danny and Dario were talking about in terms of energy control solutions, software solutions with various components of small distributed solar, water. So I think what comes out of it is a really interesting landscape of the potential for solutions to be enacted upon, and really the answer seems to be lying in these collaboration and partnerships between different elements of the technology space and the financing space. And so that's really the takeaway for me today, is that there's an array of technologies, and they're working across large scale to small scale. One thing I was curious about, Ryan, as I was listening to you speak, is there some specific areas where you've seen maybe some specific examples of the connection between say corporate governance and the ESG mandate, and how it's played out in Africa?
Thanks for that, Michael. I think more broadly, there's I can't point to a specific example in Africa, but I will say more broadly, if you look at what's happening across the U.S., there are lots of good examples of how governance is playing out. You look at the scandal, if you will, with Cambridge Analytica and Facebook a few years back around governance and how that affected shareholder value, and a huge drop in that stock associated with that scandal, and a lot of the controls that just weren't in place to ensure that consumer data, for instance, was not abused, and they had a process in place to address that. And so I think there are, again, whether it's the E, where you're dealing with energy management or water management, or the environmental impact, or the S, as you look at data privacy or in data security, or diversity and inclusion, or labor practices, or the governance, where you're looking at things like systemic risk, you're looking at business ethics, you're looking at supply chain management. These are things that really cross every industry, every type of company, every type of investment. The question is, how are you integrating them, and what processes and plans and metrics do you have in place to kind of show that you're driving value and performance? So hopefully that answers your question. And while I can't point to Africa, there are a lot of other examples around the globe.
Oh, interesting, because it's like that. It's like the thread that they were talking about in terms of all we need to do is connect the devices to the cloud, and it's all okay. But you realize, these are all very personal data sets and information, and the management of that from a cybersecurity perspective and other things is really important. I know that's one area that Baker Hughes is actually involved with quite a bit in our digital business, in terms of both the asset performance management, but also the security of these distributed energy assets with the sets of the array of sensor data, and the types of control of those data sets, and who should have access to them, and how does that work, both for anonymization purposes to do big data analysis, but also the actual management of the proprietary data, if you're talking about the revenue
that's one of the biggest areas, Michael. And a lot of folks are looking at what your ability to describe your approach to data privacy, data security. What metrics do you have in place to show how you're performing on protecting people's personally identifiable information? These are things that are absolutely critical to the long-term, if you will, value of companies. Because one of the things that gets this ties to sustainability and ESG is, whereas in 1975, when you looked at the valuation of a company, 83% of the value of a company was tied to tangible assets in 1975. Fast forward to 2020, 2021, that number is completely flipped. Now you have nearly 90% of a company's value is tied to intangible assets. And those are things like not only your reputation, but consumer loyalty, all of which tie back to these environmental, social governance factors like data privacy that can affect the ability for the company to both draw investment, but also build value over time.
Interesting.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. We are looking forward to keeping in touch and learning more about what you do. Now, I think I would like to thank the sponsors for the wonderful job, without whom we wouldn't have all these, wouldn't have this conference. I would like to thank in particular Mary and Jim Donovan, and I also like to thank Regis University. When you are doing something like this, it's not just what you're seeing in front of you, that is me, but really a lot of people are involved. The advisory committee, the marketing committee, the Regis IT group, the Davis Chira production, who has done a fantastic job in making this production a success. Now, I would like to say a few things before I conclude the conference. One is that we are different from other conferences in the sense that we don't just meet and get excited about things and we forget about it until next year. We actually do projects on the ground to make a difference on the ground, so that when we talk about stuff, we have to follow that up with action. And that's exactly what you do. So if you have a project that needs financing, you want a project that needs to be evaluated so that it can be brought up to a level where it's bankable, contact us. We'll be happy to work with you. Or if you are an investor, you are looking for a project, or you are a professional, you are looking to offer professional services, let us know about it. Our main aim is to form an ecosystem that is going to be actualizing projects on the ground so that we can make a difference on the ground. Second is we want to know how well we are doing. And so you're going to see some surveys coming up to you, and please respond to those surveys so we know what we are doing well and where we need to improve. And lastly, we are going to be working closely with Peter in terms of actualizing his local electricity access program. And those who are interested in being part of that, let us know, because we're going to have conversations already. I've been contacted to have a meeting next week. So we need to have those people who are interested to join us. And finally, I would like to thank you all for spending your valuable time. I'm sure you would have been doing something else in place of attending the conference. But because of your dedication, you were able to come to the conference, or at least from your home, watch the conference. And we really appreciate that. Thank you. As we look to 2022, keep looking at our website, and that's where you are going to find the dates for next year. We thank you very much. Bye.